Chapter 4205. Nietian was extremely shocked by Demon God Chi's proposal. At the same time, he was doubtful. Demon God Chi's half-soul was indeed in his body. He definitely wanted it back, but would he really destroy the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon? Seeing Nietian's hesitation, the Chi demon god smiled sinisterly and said, "Kid, you should have seen my strength just now. Without me, those angels would have lost beyond the shadow of a doubt. It's not important that they died. Once the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon awakens, the imperial karmic ruins will be summoned back to the all-heaven sacred world. That will be the true end of the world." Nietian's eyes trembled slightly. He could obviously tell that Demon God Chi was trying to bait him. Demon God Chi observed Nietian's reaction as he said patiently, "I don't need to tell you how powerful the imperial karmic ruins are, right? Who in the current all-heaven sacred world can stop the imperial karmic ruins?" Nietian's face darkened. He said nothing. He knew what Demon God Chi was saying, but that was exactly why he had to make a decision with even more caution. His next decision would affect the survival of the entire all-heaven sacred world. Damn it! Xinguang Huayu cried out at this moment. She retreated rapidly. Before her, 10,000 dragons surged. Their unparalleled presence seemed to devour everything. Even with the support of the sacred statue of ruler, Xinguang Huayu could not last much longer. "Kid, that female emperor can't last much longer. Do you still want to think about it?" Demon God Chi snickered. "How are you going to destroy the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon?" Nietian's eyes darkened slightly as he asked coldly. Although he tried his best to remain calm, there was still a slight tremble in his voice. "I'll borrow your body." Demon God Chi's eyes suddenly flickered in the darkness. Like a lone wolf in the night, he growled. Nietian's expression changed when he heard Demon God Chi's words. The first thing he thought of was that Demon God Chi was trying to possess him. This was not the first time something like this had happened to him. In fact, not long ago, he had almost taken over someone's body. At that moment, Fiend Celestial Chi was blatantly trying to occupy his body. How could he not be suspicious? "You're worried that I'll covet your body, right?" Of course, Demon God Chi knew what Nietian was thinking and laughed. "You think too little of me. To tell you the truth, this body of yours is not good enough for me. The energy in your body is too impure. If you can't refine it, there will definitely be big problems in the future." Nietian's eyes slightly sank as he said, "I don't need you to tell me about my situation. I can return your soul to you, but I won't lend you your body." The more Fiend Celestial Chi said that, the more uncertain he felt. "Little kid, do you know where this god's half-soul is? If I don't enter your body, how can I take away that half-soul?" Demon God Chi sneered. "My half-soul is a power that you cannot absorb. If it continues to exist in your body, it will be a great hidden danger to you." Nietian's expression froze, and he was momentarily speechless. Ever since he fused with the angel bloodwings and reconstructed his martial body, he had been searching for Chi Mo's half-soul to no avail. He was also puzzled. Chi Mo's half-soul was clearly in his body, so why couldn't he find it? "Little kid, there's an even deeper darkness lurking in your body. Your half-soul is imprisoned by that dark power." Demon God Chi laughed again. "You should have felt that dark power before. This god guesses that there should be an expert by your side to help you. He is the one who made some weak. It was him who used some of the weaker power to create a sealing gate to temporarily seal that darkness." When Nietian heard Fiend Celestial Chi's words, his pupils could not help but constrict. He was extremely shocked. Indeed, he had once felt an even more terrifying dark power beneath the sea of demons and gods in the demon origin embryo. Back then, when the sea of demons and gods erupted, it was Fat Cat who used the dark power to create a sealing gate to suppress the dark power. For such a long time, he had been in the midst of great changes and never had a moment of peace, so he gradually forgot about this matter. Now that Demon God Chi mentioned this matter again, how could he not be surprised? He didn't think that Demon God Chi could even see through this. "Kid, the seal gate is too weak. It can only suppress the darkness for a while. Once the darkness is stimulated and bursts out, The power of the sealed gate won't be able to stop it. Demon god Qi smiled sinisterly, and his eyes that were hidden in the darkness flickered again. Nye Tian was taken aback. Could it be that the darkness was a living thing? Little kid, you don't have much time left. Do you agree to my deal? However, demon god Qi did not continue. Instead, he glanced at Xinguang Huaiyu and the others and smiled faintly. Nye Tian's eyes trembled. He saw that the sovereign holy statue outside of Xinguang Huaiyu's body had already been destroyed, and he was fleeing in panic. Meanwhile, the three old ancestors on the other side were in even more danger. Under the pressure of the three black dragons, they were all already injured, on the verge of death. You have the talent and willpower of an expert, but you don't have the ruthlessness of an expert. When Fiend Celestial Qi saw that Nye Tian was still hesitating, he said with a smile, "A true expert has to be willing to sacrifice anyone. You can't do that. You care too much and want to protect them wholeheartedly. This is your greatest weakness, and it will always be. It will be the point of your death. You will definitely accept my conditions, because this is your nature. You can't watch these people die, and you can't let the Imperial Karma ruins return." Really? Every sentence fell into Nye Tian's ears. Fiend Celestial Qi seemed to have completely seen through him. Nye Tian's face was gloomy, and his chest rose and fell slightly. His breathing was a little hurried. He saw that Fiend Celestial Qi had dug a trap right in front of him, but he had no choice but to jump in. Even though he knew it was a trap, he had no choice but to jump in without hesitation. "I agree." Moments later, Nye Tian said with a deep voice, his face determined. You really can't become a true expert." Fiend Celestial Qi sneered coldly, and his eyes shone with disdain. From his point of view, an expert was someone who dared to sacrifice everything. Nye Tian didn't have this condition, so it was difficult for him to achieve greatness. "Let's begin," said Nye Tian with a cold expression. "Very good." Fiend Celestial Qi took a step forward, and his figure appeared from the darkness, revealing an incorporeal face. He said, "The Emperor's Heartstone is in your hands, right?" "Yes." Nye Tian nodded, not knowing what Fiend Celestial Qi wanted to do. "Take it out." Fiend Celestial Qi's lips twitched, and he stared at Nye Tian with a pair of abyss-like eyes. He said word by word, "Eat it. Eat it." Nye Tian looked at the Emperor's Heartstone in his hand, and his eyes trembled. He almost thought that he had heard wrongly. Chapter 4206. A Second Heart. Nye Tian's expression changed in shock. He was stunned on the spot. How could he have imagined that the Emperor's Heartstone was the Emperor's second heart? According to what Yao had said and the records in the heavenly light dragon shadow, the Emperor's Heartstone was something that could awaken the Emperor's heart ancestral dragon. How could it be the Emperor's second heart? Was demon god Qi lying? Whether it's the night dragons that are closely related to the Emperor's Karma ruins or the records in a book, they're both incomplete. Some of them are even wrong. Demon god Qi looked at Nye Tian and said, "I and the Emperor's Karma ruins are born from the same source. No one knows everything about it better than I do. Right? Double quotation mark. Born from the same source?" Nye Tian was taken aback once again as he looked at Fiend Celestial Qi in horror. It was even more impossible for him to imagine that demon god Qi and the Emperor's Karma ruins were born from the same source. Qi Jin had said that demon god Qi and the Emperor's Karma ruins were closely related, but it seemed rather unlikely that they were born from the same source. "Nye Tian, you don't have much time left. Your angel friends can't last much longer." Demon god Qi did not explain too much to Nye Tian. Instead, he smiled sinisterly and said, "I can tell you that I'm the only one in the current All-Heaven Saints world who can stop the Emperor's Karma ruins from returning. Then why do you want to borrow my body?" Nye Tian's face darkened as he asked cautiously, "I'm only half a soul right now. My soul is incomplete and my martial body is incomplete. How am I supposed to fight against the Emperor's heart ancestral dragon?" Demon god Qi's face darkened coldly. "We can't stop the Emperor's heart ancestral dragons awakening anymore. The only way is to destroy it. And the only way to destroy the Emperor's heart is to use another Emperor's heart. Emperor's heart. Nietion's face darkened slightly. He carefully observed the Emperor's karma ruins in an attempt to find some clues from its reaction. A while later, he made up his mind. He tilted his head back and swallowed the Emperor's heartstone. Whoosh! The moment the Emperor's heartstone entered his body, Nietion felt an endless power surge through his limbs and meridians. It actually made him feel extremely comfortable. Boom! However, in the next moment, an extremely terrifying and vigorous force was born in his body. It erupted like a mountain torrent, making him feel as if there were countless giant dragons galloping and roaring in his body. A deep tearing sensation instantly spread throughout his body. Nietion couldn't bear the excruciating pain for a moment and screamed. In the next instant, numerous lacerations appeared on his body. It was as if his entire body was being torn apart bit by bit. This is the moment. Seeing this, Fiend God Chi's lips curled into a cold smirk. Then, he moved and transformed into a ball of black light that entered Nietion's body. Nietion's spiritual consciousness instantly suffered a great impact, causing his consciousness to be somewhat scattered, as if his soul was about to be torn apart. This body is indeed a little weak, but can still be used. Fiend God Chi took over Nietion's body and snickered. A gush of evil soul force spread in all directions, trying to expel Nietion's soul from his body. Damn it! The sudden change caught Nietion off guard, and he roared. Fiend God Chi was obviously trying to take over his body. Kid, didn't your parents tell you not to trust strangers so easily? Fiend God Chi laughed sinisterly. Then, the evil soul force grew stronger and forcefully forced Nietion's spiritual soul out of his body. In the blink of an eye, Fiend God Chi took control of Nietion's body. He carefully sensed and confirmed that there was no remnant of Nietion's spiritual soul in the body. Cold, he snickered. Kid, I'm not interested in your body. Although I'm only borrowing it, you have no right to continue using something that I've used and discarded. It turned out that he wasn't trying to take over Nietion's body, but merely wanted to borrow Nietion's body. Even so, he didn't want Nietion to continue living. Last time, he left a demonic seal on Nietion's body and the latter survived. This time, he wouldn't allow the latter to live. However, Fiend God Chi had a strange feeling. He felt that something was amiss, but he couldn't tell what it was. Don't worry about it. Let's get the Emperor's heart ancestral dragon first. Fiend God Chi snickered, and a violent force erupted from his body. The spear of the Emperor's heart unleashed boundless power, and his body underwent an eerie transformation. He began to transform into a dragon. In an instant, Fiend God Chi borrowed the power of Nietion's body and transformed into a half-human, half-dragon body that was dozens of meters tall. Strangely, the horns on his head weren't dragon horns, but demon horns. Bring it on. Fiend God Chi snickered, and a black spear appeared in his hand. It was the Emperor Dragon Demon Spear, transformed from the spear of the Emperor's heart. Boom! The demonic spear swept across the sky. Immediately, a powerful evil force appeared and transformed into a terrifying spear shadow that headed straight for the three black dragons roaring in the sky. Roar! The three black dragons sensed danger and roared. Their bodies flipped and shot into the sky. But in the next moment, they felt despair as the breath of death approached. Bang! Without any hesitation, the spear shadow descended from the sky and an explosion occurred. Before the three black dragons could react, their bodies exploded and turned into a rain of blood that dyed the sky red. The horrifying scene caused the expressions of the three angel patriarchs to change, and they exclaimed in unison. They were well aware of the three black dragons' strength. Even though they were heavily injured, they were still able to suppress them. But now, the three black dragons were killed by a single spear. How could they not be shocked? Just who was this person with such terrifying strength? In the next moment, they lifted their heads and saw Fiend God Chi, who resembled a dragon, a man, and a demon. Their expressions froze. All of you can die too. Fiend God Chi smiled coldly and attacked with the Emperor Dragon Demon Spear again. The sky and earth turned solemn and the spear's shadow fell like a waterfall. The three ancestral angels did not even have time to scream before they died. Not even their corpses were left. To think that the ancestral angels were killed in such a manner. It was shocking. Shenhuang Huaiyu retreated frantically. Seeing the three ancestral angels die, he could not help but exclaim, "Ancestral angels! Today, every single person here will die." Demon god Qi smiled coldly and spoke in a deep voice. The evil energy in his body instantly erupted to the limit, and then it instantly spread out like a ripple. It actually condensed into a boundless barrier that directly sealed off the surrounding space for hundreds of thousands of meters. In the next moment, a deathly aura spread out. The terrifying aura corroded everything. Ah, ah, ah. The deathly aura entered the bodies of the dragon race martial artists, and they cried out in pain. Then, their bodies began to tear apart. The deathly aura was too terrifying. They could not resist and could only wait for death. Chapter 42:07. Roar. The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon broke the seal and soared into the sky. It let out an earth-shattering dragon roar that resounded through the 9 heavens, causing the entire world to tremble. Demon god Qi held the imperial dragon demon spear in his hand and stood in the sky. He stared at the massive black dragon in a daze without fear. Instead, he looked very expectant, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Demon god Qi, I didn't think we would meet under such circumstances. The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon coiled its body and shrunk quite a bit. It was only 10,000 meters long, and its eyes were like the abyss, flickering with a sinister light. Its huge dragon mouth breathed out dragon breath that was actually a dark aura. Emperor Karma Ruins, you probably didn't expect this battle to be the battle of your two hearts. Demon god Qi smiled coldly, and a murderous aura appeared in his eyes. I know exactly what you want, Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon said coldly, but only I can use my heart. You don't deserve it. Winner takes all. Don't tell me you don't understand this logic. Demon god Qi smiled coldly and said arrogantly, today's battle will decide who your two hearts belong to. Come. As soon as he finished speaking, he made his move. The instant the imperial dragon demon spear swept through the air, it tore through the void. Instantly, thousands of spear shadows appeared. It was like a stampeding beast tide, a black mass that pressed down on the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon. Roar! The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon roared and charged forward fearlessly. Wherever it passed, the spear's shadows shattered and the void cracked. Very well. Demon god Qi smiled evilly and stabbed the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon's back with his spear tip. He then used the momentum to retreat. His soul wasn't complete, and yet Tian's martial physique was too weak. Even after devouring the imperial dragon's spear, he clearly couldn't fight the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon head-on. The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon pursued relentlessly. Terrifying forbidden runes appeared on its dark, abyss-like body, moving like little snakes. It looked extremely strange. Demon god Qi retreated continuously. Under the impact of the endless forbidden runes of darkness, he was actually injured. GMO, is this your strength? Isn't that too disappointing? The Emperor Heart ancestral dragon roared with arrogant laughter. Obviously, he was determined to succeed. This body is still too weak. It can't be of much use. The corners of Fiend God Qi's mouth pulled up into a wisp of a bitter smile, but his eyes seemed extremely strange, and there wasn't the slightest nervousness or fear in them. It was as if everything was under his control. Dying. At that moment, the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon let out a furious roar. Instantly, a terrifying ray of light appeared, descending from the sky like a mountain. It released an extremely powerful and terrifying aura that pressed down on the nightmare demon god. The demon god narrowed his eyes and tossed the imperial dragon demon spear into the air. Then, waves of demon chi were released from his body. The demon chi surged like the sea, threatening to engulf everything. Bang! In the next moment, the black light descended, and a loud bang rang out in the void. Heaven and earth shook, and the wilderness shook. Fiend Celestial Cheese figure suddenly froze before he retreated thousands of meters away. At the same time, the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon's massive body was also forced to retreat, and its eyes were filled with shock. Deep Karma Ruins, how's this power? Fiend Celestial Chi stabilized himself. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, a clear sign that he was slightly injured. However, he did not panic, and was instead very proud. This is the Chi of the Dragon Farmer. The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon exclaimed, "Why do you have the Chi of the Dragon Farmer on you? The body I'm using might be a little weak, but it's the one that carries the mandate of heaven. Take a closer look, and you'll know." Fiend Celestial Chi's lips pulled into a sinister smile as he spoke in a cold tone. The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon exclaimed. Its eyes widened, and a shocked expression appeared on its face as it shrieked, "He's a dragon farmer." "Humph." Fiend Celestial Chi sneered and said arrogantly, "Deep Karma Ruins, even you are afraid of the Chi of the Dragon Farmer, right? However, let me tell you, this kid is not as simple as a dragon farmer. He's also a heaven's limit. Back then, didn't His Majesty bring us out from that place so that we could find the dragon farmers and heaven's limits? When I saw this kid, he had the prophecy seal on him, which means that His Majesty has already seen him. However, what's strange is that His Majesty didn't kill him, but let him out to find the prophecy saint. This kid is very smart. He should have seen through His Majesty's plan. However, he definitely doesn't know that I'm not the prophecy saint. The real prophecy saint can't be found with the prophecy seal." The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon heard Fiend Celestial Chi's words, and its huge dragon eyes were filled with terror. It did not expect Nyation to carry so many secrets. His Majesty has already fallen. The agreement from back then is no longer valid. After a while, the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon calmed down and growled, "I don't care if he's a dragon farmer or a heaven's limit. He must die today. Don't worry, as long as I obtain your dual hearts, this kid won't be able to live." Fiend Celestial Chi smirked cold, and his aura erupted in an instant, instantly increasing by several times. Outside his body, the dragon scales cracked, forming many bloody wounds. His entire body was directly dripping with blood. He was using Nyetion's body too much, and the side effects were very obvious under the immense power. However, he did not care. After all, he would only use this body once. He just needed to force the Emperor's Heart out of the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon. "Fiend Celestial Chi, you underestimate me too much." The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon looked at Fiend Celestial Chi and sneered. Then its body moved, and a black aura spread out. Everywhere it passed, the dragon race martial artists that were hit by the Emperor Dragon Forbidden Marks turned into black aura and dissipated, and the Emperor Dragon Forbidden Marks appeared. Fiend Celestial Chi's expression changed when he saw this. Then, countless forbidden marks gathered around the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon, forming an armor with forbidden marks around its body. In an instant, the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon's aura skyrocketed, and it was no weaker than Fiend Celestial Chi, so you're not trying to control these people, but to use the Emperor Dragon Forbidden Marks to absorb their bloodline power and make it your own. Fiend Celestial Chi immediately reacted and smiled. "Karma Ruin, you're ruthless indeed. You're willing to sacrifice so many of your people just to return." "My people?" The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon sneered. "I've never treated them as my people. They're merely stepping stones on my path to the peak." Fiend Celestial Chi's lips twitched. "Very well, this is interesting." "It is indeed interesting." Just as he finished speaking, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in his divine sense, causing his expression to change, and he was shocked on the spot. The voice belonged to Nyetion. Chapter 42:08. Demon God, Chi suddenly heard Nyetion's voice. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. He even suspected that it was an illusion. He had clearly expelled Nyetion's soul from his body. How could it suddenly reappear? "Are you surprised?" Nyetion's voice sounded again. It was filled with playfulness and provocation. How can this be? Demon god Qi's eyes trembled. He growled in anger. You should deal with the guy in front of you first. Nie Tianling laughed. Then, the presence of his soul disappeared as if it had never appeared. Demon god Qi's expression froze. His expression became extremely ugly. Roar! At that moment, the DXine ancestral dragon let out a furious roar, and its massive body pressed down like a mountain. Terrifying seals were released one after another, forming a terrifying net in the air. A tearing aura instantly spread out, covering the world with an intense aura of destruction. Demon god Qi frowned. The imperial dragon demonic spear swept through the air. The spear's tip was invincible. The world turned solemn, as if it had sensed the fate of destruction. Kaboom! In the next moment, a dark spear shadow appeared. The space was torn apart, and an abyss-like crack appeared. It was like a huge beast lurking in the space had opened its dark mouth. Rumble. Bang, bang, bang. Then, the spear shadow rushed out and bombarded the terrifying giant net. A deafening explosion sounded, and the moment the giant net was torn apart, the spear shadow also collapsed inch by inch. In the chaotic space, demon god Qi and the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon retreated. Under this level of impact, even they would have to temporarily avoid the brunt of it. Then, the two exchanged several more blows. For a moment, the world was gloomy. Chiemo, my dual hearts are useless to you. Why do you have to force me? The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon's massive body rumbled as a dragon's roar resounded across the heavens and earth, shaking the void. Karma ruins, you and I both know that only one of us can survive. If you obtain the twin hearts and return to the all-heavens sacred world, will I still have a chance to live? Demon god Qi stood in the air with a cold glint in his eyes. He had snatched the Karma ruins' twin hearts to destroy them. He and the Emperor's Karma ruins came from the same source, like twin flowers. Only one of them could survive. Chiemo, I promise you that as long as you give up, I won't kill you when I return to the all-heavens sacred world, said the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon loudly. Promise. However, fiend god Qi laughed as though he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He said coldly, I remember that you once promised His Majesty Human Emperor that you would not touch anyone from the dragon race, no matter what. What about now? The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon's eyes darkened slightly. The Human Emperor has already fallen, so the promise from back then is naturally no longer there. If you and I are not dead, will His Majesty die? Fiend god Qi sneered and asked in a deep voice, I really want to see how you will face Human Emperor after he revives. Do you really think that I will bring you, Sangxiong, back to life? The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon's expression changed immediately. He roared, and the surrounding space shook violently, as if it was about to collapse. Fiend god Qi sneered. Karma ruins, you're far too arrogant. His Majesty's fate is not something you can decide. The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon was immediately enraged. He roared, I'll finish you off first. Let's see how you, who only has half a soul left, can defeat me. As soon as he finished speaking, the black dragon rolled up and the forbidden inscription armor on his body immediately bloomed, releasing waves of enormous and boundless dark inscriptions that surged over like a tide in the dark night. Demon god Qi was not afraid at all. He struck with the imperial dragon demon spear once again. As the spear fell, it was invincible. Countless dark lines shattered, and a wound that was dozens of meters long appeared on the back of the Exine ancestral dragon. Blood gushed out like a fountain. Roar! The dragon howled in pain, shaking the heavens. Now, fiend god Qi cried out in joy. Power surged out of his body, and his demonic aura surged into the sky. At the same time, the aura of a dragon roiled like the sea, surging onto the Emperor Dragon Demon Spear. Die! With a roar, fiend god Qi stabbed out with his spear. The shadow of the spear pierced through the sky, and the sound of thunder tore through everything as it attacked the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon. Damn it, Chiemo! The Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon suddenly felt the aura of death approaching. He roared in anger, and the inscriptions on his body surged, forming a blade of darkness that shot out. Bang! In an instant, the two extreme powers collided, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Then, endless waves swept out in all directions. Under the impact of the violent power, the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon scales fell off, and his body cracked. His flesh, meridians, and bones were instantly destroyed. At the same time, Fiend God Chi was sent flying. His body suffered from the terrifying impact, and his demonic dragon body cracked and shrunk rapidly. After a long while, the violent power between the heavens and earth finally dissipated. The void returned to its calm state, but the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon was nowhere to be seen. There was only a dark stone floating in the air. It was extremely strange. The Emperor's Heart. Not far away, Fiend God Chi had already recovered his appearance of Nietion. He looked at the dark stone and exclaimed in surprise. However, just as he took a step forward, his body stiffened. This dark stone was the Emperor's Heart stone that was formed after the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon fell into a deep slumber. It was the same as the Emperor's Heart stone that Nietion swallowed. After the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon was destroyed, it returned to its original state. Fiend God Chi stared at the Emperor's Heart stone passionately. He opened his mouth slightly, clearly wanting to say something but couldn't. At that moment, he felt that the body he was in was no longer under his control. Another divine soul appeared and suppressed his divine soul, making it difficult for him to use it. Nietion. Finally, Fiend God Chi used all his strength to say a name. Fiend God Chi, I'll lend my body to you. Now that you're done using it, return it to me. Nietion's voice sounded. The darkness in his eyes dissipated, and he returned to normal. Nietion, you... Fiend God Chi's divine soul was imprisoned, and his terrified voice resounded in Nietion's consciousness. Nietion's lips twitched coldly, and he mumbled, "Since you want the other half of my divine soul, go find it." With that, he forcefully pushed Fiend God Chi's divine soul into the bottom of the sea of demons and sealed it into the Fiend God tenebrous domain. After doing all this, Nietion let out a sigh of relief. He immediately felt his entire body go limp, and he almost couldn't stand. His lips twitched, and he smiled. "Lulu, it's all thanks to you this time. It's a win-win situation." Then, the saint's soul blood mark on his forehead lit up, and Liolio's voice sounded. It turned out that when Fiend God Chi forcibly took over Nietion's martial body, the latter's divine soul did not leave the martial body. Instead, it hid in the saint's soul blood seal and waited for Fiend God Chi's divine soul to weaken before taking back control of the martial body. With his divine soul back, Nietion let out a long breath of turbid air. His expression was much more relaxed. Fiend God Chi and the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon were both heavily injured and practically died together. This ending was better than he had expected. However, it was a pity that all the Dragon Clan martial artists had died. After this incident, the overall strength of the Dragon Clan would definitely be greatly reduced. Chapter 4209. Your Majesty Emperor. Seeing that Xinguang Yuyu was badly injured and covered in blood, Nietion immediately rushed over to the latter's side to treat his injuries and stabilize his breathing. He didn't think that Xinguang Yuyu would be able to survive the impact of the earlier attack. He had thought that no one would survive the battle between Chi Fiend God and the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon. Nietion checked Xinguang Yu's injuries. Although she was heavily injured, her vital parts weren't hurt and her life wasn't in danger after her breathing stabilized. Nietion, what happened just now? Xinguang Yu looked at Nietion in shock after her injury stabilized. Nietion didn't hide anything and told him what had happened just now. Hearing those words, Xinguang Yu was completely dumbfounded, unable to react for a long time. She didn't expect such a dramatic and thrilling turn of events. No wonder when I used the Sovereign Lord's blood, I felt like I couldn't control the power I felt. A moment later, Xinguang Yu reacted and smiled bitterly. So it was all Demon God Chi's doing. I also didn't expect Demon God Chi to appear. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said in a relaxed manner, "Speaking of which, it's all thanks to him that we were able to stop the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon from returning. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have been able to defeat the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon." Xinguang Huaiyu nodded in silence. She then looked worriedly at Nie Tian and said, "Demon God Qi didn't harm you when he took over your body, right?" "I'm fine." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He looked tired and urgently needed rest. However, he was also thinking about the conversation between Demon God Qi and the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon. Although Demon God Qi and the Emperor Heart ancestral dragon originated from the same source, there was a certain competitive relationship between the two. In the end, only one of them could survive. This was a bit like Qi Xinu and Ni jamming. Once a fight broke out, only one could survive. Furthermore, the two of them mentioned a very important person, the human Emperor Yu Tsang. In fact, the birth of Demon God Qi and the Imperial Karma ruins had a lot to do with Imperial Firmament. The Qi Demon God and the Emperor's Karma ruins had some sort of agreement with Yu Tsangqiu. It seemed like they were looking for the heaven-bound ones and the dragon shepherds. More importantly, Fiend Celestial Qi even mentioned the prophecy saint. Previously, Nie Tian had always thought that Demon God Qi was the prophecy holy son that Yu Tsangqiu was looking for, because the latter had activated the prophecy holy seal. However, Fiend Celestial Qi said that the prophecy holy seal was not used to find the prophecy son, and he was not the prophecy son either. Everything was like a huge mess, entangling Nie Tian's heart, making it hard for him to breathe. Everything seemed to be becoming clearer and more complicated at the same time. What kind of existences were Demon God Qi and Emperor Karma ruins? What was Yu Tsangqiu's goal behind them? Nie Tian, Demon God Qi's soul is temporarily imprisoned by you, and the Emperor Karma ruins' return has been stopped. You don't have to think too much now. Focus on the present and work hard to improve your cultivation. Xinguang Huaiyu could tell what Nie Tian was thinking. His gaze turned solemn, and he said in a deep voice, the Emperor, believe that one day the all-heavens sacred world is in danger of collapsing. Because the all-heavens sacred world is in danger of collapsing, and you will be the pillar that holds it up." Sensing the determination in Xinguang Huaiyu's eyes, Nie Tian's lips curled into a bitter smile, and he said, "I hope so." The matter of the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon came to an end for now. Because the Emperor's Heart ancestral dragon was in a deep slumber, it was temporarily impossible for the Emperor Karma ruins to return. Nie Tian looked at the Emperor's Heartstone not far away and had a strange feeling. At this moment, two figures appeared in the distant void. They were Yi Yao and Zhu Shi. The two of them did not come over and escape the disaster. What happened here? Yi Yao came to Nie Tian's side and asked in shock when he smelled the bloody scent in the air. Nie Tian did not hide anything and told them everything. Yi Yao and Zhu Shi were shocked and could not react for a long time. "Yi Yao, I ate your Emperor's Heartstone. Take it with you. Remember to take care of it carefully," Nie Tian said to Yi Yao. "Ate it." Yi Yao was stunned and did not understand what Nie Tian meant. The Emperor's Heartstone was not a miracle pill. How could it be eaten so easily? Nie Tian smiled bitterly and did not explain much. He reached out and held the Emperor's Heartstone in his hand and handed it to Yi Yao. Yi Yao took the Emperor's Heartstone and frowned. He had a strange expression. "What is it?" Nie Tian's heart sank, and he asked anxiously. "This Emperor's Heartstone is different from the previous one." Yi Yao frowned and focused his divine sense to sense the Emperor's Heartstone in his hand. The expressions of Nie Tian and the others changed. They did not dare to disturb Yi Yao. After a long time, Yi Yao let out a long sigh, but his expression became even stranger. He looked at the Emperor's Heartstone and said, "I couldn't sense any aura from the previous Emperor's Heartstone, but this one, there's clearly a voice." "A sound?" Everyone was stunned and did not understand what Yi Yao meant. "A sound." Yi Yao nodded and said word by word, "The sound of a beating heart." "The sound of a beating heart?" Nie Tian's expression changed when he heard Yi Yao's words. Yi Yao was very sure and nodded. "It is indeed the sound of a beating heart. I have a feeling that the Emperor's heart is changing." "The Emperor's heart is changing." Everyone's expression changed, and they exclaimed, "How is it possible that the emperor's heart was changing?" "Are you sure?" Nie Tian became cold after a while and asked Yi Yao with a gloomy expression. "I should be sure." Yi Yao was not completely sure and could only guess. "I think it might be because of the dragon husbandry qi. It has some kind of effect on the emperor's heart." Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he nodded slightly. He felt that Yi Yao's guess was reasonable. The emperor's heart ancestral dragon was destroyed by the dragon husbandry qi by demon god qi and fell into a deep sleep. Logically, the emperor's heart ancestral dragon should not have any aura when it fell into a deep sleep. It was too strange to suddenly hear the sound of a beating heart. "Yi Yao, keep this emperor's heart stone well. You must take care of it carefully," Nie Tian said to Yi Yao after he quickly calmed down. He had a feeling that perhaps the thing in this emperor's heart would become his trump card against Di Curson in the future. Di Curson could not have imagined that his emperor's heart would change. "Yes." Yi Yao nodded and carefully put the emperor's heartstone away. Chapter 42:10. Zhu Rushuang's aura erupted, bringing with it a powerful pressure that caused the surrounding space to tremble incessantly. She had been seriously injured and had only stabilized a little at the moment, but her eyes were clearly filled with murderous intent as she pressed Xinguang Huaiyu for an answer. "Senior, calm down first." Nie Tian frowned and took a step forward, motioning for Zhu Rushuang not to act rashly. He naturally knew why Zhu Rushuang was so agitated. When Zhu Rong died, he had told her that her child was still alive and told her to find Xinguang Huaiyu. The reason why Zhu Rushuang hated Zhu Rong so much was that the latter had killed her child and husband. But now, the person who knew the whereabouts of her child was right in front of her. How could she restrain herself? Xinguang Huaiyu frowned and said coldly, "Zhu Rushuang, are you crazy?" "Xinguang Huaiyu, I already know." The murderous intent in Zhu Rushuang's eyes intensified, and she almost roared, "Tell me, where is my child?" Xinguang Huaiyu's pale face changed, and she was stunned for a moment before she asked in a deep voice, "Where is Zhu Rong?" "He's gone." Zhu Rushuang suppressed her anger and spat out 2 words in a cold voice. Xinguang Huaiyu's eyes trembled. Although he had expected it, he was still very shocked. He knew that if Zhu Rong was still alive, Zhu Rushuang would not know about what happened back then and the existence of that child. The Angel Clan and the Dragon Clan suffered great changes at the same time. Perhaps what happened back then is not that important anymore. Xinguang Huaiyu was silent for a moment before she suddenly smiled bitterly and began to talk about what happened back then. It turned out that when the matter of Xinguang Yiqian and Zhu Rushuang broke out, they were strongly opposed by the 2 clans. The upper echelons of the 2 clans discussed and decided to kill their child and imprison them for life. But Xinguang Yiqian and Zhu Rushuang had special identities. One was the top genius of the Angel Clan, and the other was a young leader of the Dragon Clan. They both had a group of loyal followers, especially Xinguang Yiqian, whose strength was close to the peak of the Sky Martial Saint Ancestor realm, and he was humble and respectful. He was loved by the people of his clan and some young martial artists. There were even rumors that Xinguang Yiqian was already the next emperor. When the followers of the Light Angel tribe and Xinguang Yiqian learned of the decision of the 2 tribes, they immediately declared that they would rise up and fight for Xinguang Yiqian. Xinguang Huaiyu, who was also the current Angel Emperor, was Xinguang Yiqian's elder sister. She felt that the Angel tribe and a few other members of the Angel tribe weren't enough, so she secretly contacted Zhu Rong, hoping that he would lead his tribesmen in a rebellion. At that time, Zhu Rong was in a state of indecision. He knew that resisting was a very dangerous step. If he took the wrong step, it wouldn't just be him and his daughter who would die, but the entire Grand Voodoo Frozen Inn clan. After a long period of consideration, Zhu Rong finally decided to take the risk and resist in order to protect Zhu Rushuang. But it was at this time that Xinguang Yiqian appeared, and the situation took a huge turn for the better. Xinguang Yiqian knew that if Xinguang Huaiyu and Zhu Rong really led their tribesmen in a rebellion, it would bring a huge disaster to the Angel tribe and Dragon tribe. Who knew how many people would die? because of it. He didn't want to see that happen, and he was even more unwilling to see it happen because of him. In the end, he made a shocking decision: self-sacrifice. Shengguang Yitian found the higher-ups of the two tribes and sacrificed himself in exchange for the survival of Zhu Rushuang and the child. The higher-ups of the two tribes originally only allowed Zhu Rushuang to live, but the child was definitely not to be spared. However, Shengguang Yitian proposed a fair duel with the Angel Emperor at the time. If he lost, the child would die. If he won, the child would live. At the time, Shengguang Yitian wasn't even 10,000 years old, and he was still a young cultivator. The Angel Emperor accepted the challenge, but he suffered a crushing defeat. In the end, the higher-ups of the two tribes accepted Shengguang Yitian's proposal, but Zhu Rushuang was banned from the Ancestral Dragon's abyss for the rest of her life, and the child's identity couldn't be exposed either. Moreover, if the child showed any signs of abnormality, the two tribes wouldn't hesitate to get rid of him. Only a handful of people knew about this matter, and it should have been a secret to be brought to the grave, but Zhu Rong had still revealed it. Perhaps Zhu Rong felt that he had let Zhu Rushuang down, and letting the latter know the truth was the last thing he could do to make up for it. After listening to Shengguang Huayu's words, Zhu Rushuang fell into a long silence. Her eyes were glazed over, and she seemed to have lost her mind. Shengguang Huayu looked at the woman in front of him, and the fierceness in his eyes faded, replaced by calmness. Back then, she had hated Zhu Rushuang to the core. She felt that Zhu Rushuang was the one who caused Shengguang Yitian's death. But now, everything was in the past. Perhaps, if Zhu Rushuang had been the one who died, Shengguang Yitian would have truly suffered. After a long time, Zhu Rushuang's eyes flickered, and she asked nervously, "Where's my child? Are you sure you want to disturb his peace?" Shengguang Huayu looked at Zhu Rushuang and retorted, "I." Zhu Rushuang's pupils constricted, and she was stunned for a moment, not knowing what to say. It was only then that she suddenly realized, did she really want to see that child? Perhaps it was enough to know that the child was still alive. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly stepped forward and asked, "Lord Emperor, where is he?" Shengguang Huayu was taken aback, not expecting Nie Tian to suddenly ask such a question. Nie Tian looked at Zhu Rushuang and said with an indifferent but firm tone, "I'm a blood relative. Of course I have to meet him." He could see Zhu Rushuang's hesitation, which was why he had reminded her. In his view, the so-called bond of flesh and blood meant that they had to meet each other. If they only looked at each other from afar, it would forever be a one-way relationship, and it would instead become a burden in the heart. Zhu Rushuang suddenly understood, and her eyes blazed as she nodded heavily at Shengguang Huayu. Shengguang Huayu hesitated for a moment, but still said, "His name is Li Yu, and he is in the Bloodwing Academy." "Thank you." Zhu Rushuang nodded slightly, and her expression was much calmer as she expressed her gratitude. The corners of Shengguang Huayu's mouth twitched, but there was some worry in his eyes. He did not know whether it was right or wrong to tell Zhu Rushuang about Li Yu. A moment later, Shengguang Huayu, Nie Tian, and the others prepared to leave, while Zhu Rushuang and Zhu Shi stayed in the Ancestral Dragon's abyss. Yao also planned to stay. However, before they left, Yao pulled Nie Tian to the side with a nervous look on his face. "What's wrong?" Nie Tian noticed that Yao's expression was not right and could not help asking. "Nie Tian, the person you mentioned just now, does he have the strongest bloodline of both the Angel clan and the Dragon clan?" Yao took a deep breath, calmed himself down, and asked cautiously. Nie Tian nodded and asked, "Is there a problem?" Li Yu is the son of Shengguang Huayu and Zhu Rushuang, and possessed both the Angel of Light and the Grand Sorcerer Frozen in bloodline. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had the strongest bloodline of both the Angel clan and the Dragon clan. Chapter 42:11. The Demon Controller. Upon hearing these three words, Nie Tian's expression involuntarily changed, and his heart sank inexplicably, as if he had sensed something. It was a wonderful feeling, as if he had something to do with the Demon Controller. Looking at Nie Tian, Yao seemed to understand his feelings. After a moment of silence, he said, "The demon controller is one of the three great prophecies of the dragon tribe, just like the dragon shepherds. The three great prophecies of the Taishu." Nietion's expression changed again when he heard the name. He had heard it from Yi Yao before. Hearing it again made him even more interested. According to Yi Yao, the three great prophecies of the Taishu originated from the night dragon tribe. Strangely enough, Nietion had never believed in prophecies and predestination. However, he had experienced prophecies and predestinies over and over again. The Star Saint Lord, the Master of the Sky, the Dragon Shepherds, the Celestial Terminator, the Beacon Emperor, and even the High Priests of the four ancient holy clans. These identities all carried a certain air of predestination, which made him shoulder too many burdens. The three great prophecies of the Taishu originated from the Night Dragon tribe before the Primordial Age. It said that each prophecy is about a person, and the person in the prophecy is related to the life and death of the entire dragon tribe. Yi Yao said seriously. "Do you know what the prophecy about the demon controller is?" Nietion frowned and asked. In the three great prophecies of the Taishu, the demon controller represents destruction, the dragon rebel lord represents hope, and the dragon shepherds represent rebirth. Yi Yao looked at Nietion. After all, Li Yu's identity was special. He was Zhu Rushuang's son and Xinguang Huayu's nephew. He also had the strongest bloodlines of the dragon tribe and the angel tribe. If his identity was made public, the two tribes would be in chaos. Zhu Rushuang and Xinguang Huayu were the strongest experts of the dragon clan and the angel clan respectively. How would they react if they knew that Li Yu was a demon tamer? Of course, Nietion knew what Yi Yao was worried about. After a long silence, he asked, "How can you be sure that Li Yu is the exorcist?" Moreover, in the beginning, because he couldn't be recognized by others, he could only hide everything and wander around the angel race and the dragon race. However, if a demon tamer were to encounter someone who could awaken the blood of destruction in his body, I will become a true demon tamer and exterminate the angel clan and the dragon clan. As Yi Yao spoke, his eyes trembled slightly. It was clear that he was afraid of something. Blood of destruction? Nietion stared blankly for a moment, his brows furrowed, but his eyes flashed with a fiery light. "You mean to say, before the demon master awakens the blood of destruction, he is no threat to the angel clan and the dragon clan, right?" "Yes." Yi Yao nodded. Seeing through Nietion's thoughts, he smiled bitterly. Since the demon master has appeared, he will definitely encounter the person who can awaken the blood of destruction. That's not necessarily true. Nietion smiled faintly. If we hide the demon master so that he will never know the truth, will he still encounter that person? "You mean?" Yi Yao's eyes trembled. He immediately understood and looked at Zhu Rushuang, who was not far away. The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched. "Senior Zhu has been separated from your son for too long. Shouldn't you have a good reunion?" Yi Yao frowned for a moment, and then said with a bitter smile, "This can be considered as a method that isn't really a method." It was obvious that Nietion wanted Li Yu to stay in the ancestral dragon's abyss. This way, the chances of him meeting that person would be much smaller. After making up his mind, Nietion and Yi Yao came to Zhu Rushuang and Xinguang Huayu's side. Nietion glanced at Xinguang Huayu and sent a voice transmission to the latter. Then he looked at Zhu Rushuang and said, "Senior, you're seriously injured and need to recuperate. It's not good for you to leave the ancestral dragon's abyss." Zhu Rushuang frowned. She felt that there was something wrong with Nietion's expression, but she did not say anything. "Zhu Rushuang, although it's been a long time since that incident, I hope you won't violate the agreement. If you want to see Li Yu, I can let him come to the ancestral dragon's abyss." Xinguang Huayu looked at Zhu Rushuang and said, "You don't want me to leave?" Zhu Rushuang was smart and immediately saw that something was wrong. She frowned and said, "Or you want Li Yu to come to the ancestral dragon's abyss?" "Senior, you're a smart person. There are some things that I'm not sure about, but I beg you not to leave the ancestral dragon's abyss rashly. I also hope that you can let Li Yu stay in the ancestral dragon's abyss." Nietion's lips moved slightly as he said straightforwardly, "I'll wait for him here." Zhu Rushuang looked at Nietion for a long time and said in a deep voice. She did not ask too much, but she knew that Nietion would never do anything that would harm her or the Dragon Clan. "Thank you, Senior." Nietion bowed slightly and said, "I'll find Liu personally and explain everything to him." Zhu Rushuang nodded reluctantly and did not say anything else. Then Nietion and the others did not delay any further and immediately left the ancestral dragon's abyss. Yao did not stay and returned to the Night Dragon clan's ancestral land to verify some things. After leaving the ancestral dragon's abyss, Xinguang Waiyu bid farewell to Nietion and the others and returned to the City of Angels. "Nietion, thank you very much." Yao looked at Nietion and said with a smile, "Without you, I'm afraid the Dragon Clan would not exist anymore." "Well, I'm a dragon shepherd." Nietion smiled faintly. Then he suddenly thought of something and said, "You said that the other person in the 3 great prophecies of the Great Void is the Dragon Rebel Lord?" "Yes." Yao nodded. Then he saw the light in Nietion's eyes and asked in surprise, "You haven't met the Dragon Rebel Lord, have you?" "I don't know." Nietion shook his head and smiled. Then he told Yao about Ni jamming. In fact, when Yao mentioned the Dragon Rebel Lord, Nietion had guessed that the prophecy was probably referring to Ni jamming. Ni jamming was a person who had reincarnated countless times and was known as the Dragon Rebel Lord. After hearing Nietion's words, Yao was flabbergasted and couldn't utter a word for a long time. "Nietion, the person you're talking about, is probably the legendary Dragon Rebel Lord." After a long time, Yao finally reacted. He took a deep breath and said to Nietion, "In the prophecy, the Dragon Rebel Lord is from the Dragon Rebel clan. Also, the Dragon Rebel Lord is a reincarnated person with the Dragon Rebel soul in his body." "Then it should be right," Nietion said in a deep voice, his eyes trembling. Now he was basically sure that Ni jamming was the Dragon Rebel Lord, and in the 3 great prophecies, the demon controller represented destruction, the Dragon Rebel Lord represented hope, and the Dragon Shepherds represented rebirth. Maybe Ni jamming would be the key to saving the Dragon Clan. Chapter 42:12. By your side. Yao looked at Nietion in surprise. Nietion nodded slightly and stretched out his hand. A strange light vortex was surging in his palm. It was the reverse dragon soul transformed by Ni jamming. "This is..." Yao's eyes trembled slightly. Feeling the horrible aura of the reverse dragon soul, his face changed dramatically. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Reverse dragon soul. You know about the reverse dragon soul?" This time, it was Nietion's turn to ask in surprise. He didn't expect that Yao knew about the reverse dragon soul. Yao's eyes darkened and his expression became cold. He uttered the words that Nietion was very familiar with: reverse dragon soul reincarnation, ninely soul reincarnation, eternal damnation. Nietion's eyes trembled violently, and he said in surprise, "You know about the Julie soul and the reverse dragon soul. Before, Ni jamming sacrificed himself to transform into the reverse dragon soul, and Qi Xinu did the same. He exploded himself to form the Julie soul. The two of them had started a heaven-shaking bet at the cost of their own lives, and they had given control of the bet to Nietion. After getting the Julie soul and the reverse dragon soul, Nietion hadn't made up his mind whether to merge them or not. He knew that once he merged them, he couldn't stop. In the end, only one person could come out. "I didn't expect that the Dragon Rebel Lord had already met the Julie soul," Yao said in shock after standing still for a few seconds. Nietion frowned and told him about Ni jamming and Qi Xinu. In the end, he asked, "What's the matter with the reverse dragon soul and the Julie soul? What will happen if they merge?" "I don't know much about the 3 prophecies, but my grandfather told me the part about the Dragon Rebel Lord when I was a child. According to him, the Dragon Rebel Lord can only become the real Dragon Rebel Lord after merging the Julie soul and forming the 9 Ni soul. Then he can start the hope of the dragon tribe," Yao said in a deep voice after thinking for a long time. "In that case, I should merge the reverse dragon soul with the ninely soul." Nietion's eyes could not help but tremble as he asked with uncertainty. Yi Yao knitted his brows tightly. After a long silence, he said, "The Dragon Rebel and the Ninely tribes are related to some ancient secrets of the Dragon tribe and the Angel tribe. It's even related to the Daikarma land and the demon god Qi. After Enai Jianming and Qi Xinu transformed into the reverse dragon soul and the Julie soul, they no longer existed. Therefore, the fusion process is completely random." Random? Nietion's eyes narrowed in surprise. Yes. Yi Yao nodded heavily and said, "In other words, their chances of survival and death are exactly the same." This. Nietion's expression changed, and he was momentarily speechless. He originally thought that when the reverse dragon soul and the Julie soul fused, it would be a battle between Enai Jianming and Qi Xinu, a battle of souls. Unexpectedly, this was a game of pure probability. Half, 1.5. This was a shocking gamble. Apart from the relationship between Enai Jianming and Nietion, Enai Jianming's identity as the Dragon Rebel Lord involved too many things. In the three prophecies, the Dragon Rebel Lord was the hope, the turning point, and the turning point of rebirth. If Enai Jianming died, everything would be over. Half of the chance was too risky. Nietion could not take this risk, neither could the Dragon tribe. But it was like a reverse trap. If Enai Jianming could not merge with the Julie soul, he would not be the real Dragon Rebel Lord, and he would be meaningless to the Dragon tribe. If he merged with the Julie soul, he would have to take the risk of dying. It was like God tossing a coin for the survival of the Dragon tribe. Life and death, half reach. No, the Dragon tribe cannot take this risk, Yi Yao said after a long time, his eyes cold. Nietion's eyes were cold, but he did not speak. He was the one who controlled the gamble, but he could only decide whether to start or not. He could not decide the result. Such a choice put him in a dilemma of life and death. Nietion, if you trust me, give me the reverse dragon soul and the Julie soul. At this moment, Yi Yao looked at Nietion and said solemnly, "I'll definitely find a satisfactory solution." Okay. Nietion looked at Yi Yao and nodded after a long time. Enai Jianming was very important to him. For the whole Dragon tribe, it was a matter of life and death. Therefore, he had to be cautious in every decision he made. From the looks of it, Yi Yao was a trustworthy person. "I will make the Dragon Rebel Lord appear," Yi Yao said again, putting away the reverse dragon soul and the Julie soul. Nietion nodded slightly. He hoped everything would go well. Then they said goodbye. Nietion went to the Bloodwing Academy, while Yi Yao went to the ancestral land of the Night Dragon tribe. 5 days later, in the everlasting sacred realm, a towering city stood on the ground like a giant beast. The gate, which was hundreds of meters high, was like the open mouth of the giant beast. At this moment, a silver-haired figure appeared outside the city gate. It was Nietion. "This is Bloodwing City." Nietion's lips curled up in a smile. He felt excited as he looked at the huge city in front of him. He was Wu Kuei of the Hidden Dragon competition. He had chosen the Bloodwing Academy, so he came to Bloodwing City. At this moment, he was somewhat worried. He had sent Jun Jianxing to the everlasting Sacred Realm's extreme cloud city to inform the 5 great deans, but there had been no news from them. Jun Jianxing was a man of his word. Furthermore, he knew how important this matter was and would not take it lightly. However, Jun Jianxing had not appeared yet. This made Nietion have a bad feeling. Jun Jianxing is a star venerate. Even if he is killed, he can be reborn. It should be fine. Nietion frowned and comforted himself. He had already gone to Extreme Cloud City. The people of the 5 great deans were no longer there. Therefore, he came to Bloodwing City to ask the Bloodwing Academy's dean about the situation. Thinking that he would soon enter the Bloodwing Academy to cultivate, Nietion could not help but feel excited. He had never been used to cultivating in the academy. However, this time, he would be facing even more genius cultivators. To him, this was a challenge. After Nietion entered the city, he immediately headed for the Bloodwing Academy. Soon, he arrived outside the Bloodwing Academy. At this moment, many people had gathered in a huge plaza in front of the academy. They seemed to be watching something. Tian shook his head slightly. He did not have much interest and walked straight to the academy. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt two extremely powerful auras erupt. They were like flood dragons soaring into the sky. He frowned and turned around. He saw two figures standing in the plaza, as cold as sabers and swords. One was as cold as snow, and the other was as fiery as fire. These two silhouettes were actually women. Furthermore, they were exceedingly graceful and devastatingly beautiful. Chapter 42:13 Meridian of Three Lives. Sensing the familiar aura, Tian's face changed drastically. He immediately extended his divine sense and confirmed that the woman in white was indeed someone with the Meridian of Three Lives. She is from the Three Lives clan? How is this possible? Tian had a look of disbelief on his face as he was shocked. He had been to the Three Lives clan's ancestral land before. The Three Lives clan had long been exterminated. Could there still be descendants? At this time, the two figures in the sky moved at the same time. They were like two dazzling flowing lights. One was like an icy blade, while the other was like a blazing edge. The moment they collided, a dazzling scene was created. Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw the situation. These two women were both 9th-tier Heavenly Justice Saints. Their combat strength wasn't weak, and they were evenly matched. He thought for a moment and walked to the plaza. He asked a slightly plump martial artist not far away, "Senior brother, what's going on here? Don't you have eyes? Someone is dueling." That person looked very impatient and spoke in a cold manner. "Why are they dueling?" Tian frowned but didn't get angry. He continued to ask. That martial artist glared at Tian but still said, "Because of men." Men? Tian's expression changed. Could it be that these two women were jealous of each other? "Kid, are you new here?" At this time, a short martial artist looked at Tian and said with a mischievous smile, "These two senior sisters are called Huang Ling and Lai Yan. They used to be in the same team and were as close as sisters. Unfortunately, they fell in love with the same man." And then, Tian looked at that person with a gloomy face. That person couldn't help but frown and asked, "Don't you want to know who the man they fell in love with is?" "Who?" The corner of Tian's mouth twitched as he asked. "Of course it's the handsome, elegant, imposing, and dignified Ming Yufeng." That person had a mischievous smile on his face as he chuckled. Senior apprentice brother Ming Yufeng is a famous person in Bloodwing Academy, a super genius on the Bloodwing fame list. Moreover, he has the title of Bloodwing's Four Great Beauties. "Do you know how many girls have been charmed by you?" As he said that, his eyes became lustful. People couldn't help but feel that he also had improper thoughts about Ming Yufeng. The two of them are dueling because of Ming Yufeng? Tian frowned and asked coldly, "Isn't that reason enough?" The man's eyes widened as he asked in astonishment. Tian ignored this person and looked up at the battle in the sky. He had never imagined that on his first day at Bloodwing Academy, he would actually encounter such a bizarre incident. "Huang Ling, give up. Stop dreaming. Senior brother Ming will never like you." Lai Yan's body was engulfed in flames, and the space around her was like a furnace. Her eyes were cold as they locked onto Huang Ling from afar. "Senior brother Ming has the right to like whoever he likes. It's my right to like him. If you continue to be so overbearing, I won't be polite anymore." Huang Ling's body was covered in frost. Blades of ice condensed into a storm in the air. "Fine. I want to see how you're going to be rude." Lai Yan laughed coldly and moved. He slapped down, and a line of fire appeared. In an instant, a sea of fire appeared in the sky and attacked Huang Ling. Huang Ling showed no fear. She took a step forward, and several icicles pierced through the sea of fire. Bang! 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 3 muffled sounds rang out. Lai Yan was forced back several hundred meters. A good chance. Huang Ling's eyes lit up when she saw this. Wings of ice appeared on her back and spread open. She was like a giant bird of ice, releasing the power of glaciers that pressed down on Lai Yan. "You're courting death." Lai Yan's pretty face changed. She roared, and a powerful force exploded from her body. Suddenly, a pillar of fire appeared in the middle of the sea of fire, breaking the glaciers. Good. Below, the crowd cheered when they saw this scene. Tion's face was gloomy. These people who were watching the show were all indifferent. Bang! Then there was an explosion in the air. Huang Ling and Lai Yan's silhouettes were sent flying, drawing bloody arcs in the air. But after they stabilized themselves, they didn't stop. They were still as aggressive as before, as if they were their mortal enemies. If this continues, their lives will be in danger. Tion frowned. He was ready to make his move. He could not understand why no one had stopped such a thing, especially that person called Ming Yufeng. He made the two girls fight to the death here, and he didn't even show his face. Dying. At that moment, Huang Ling and Lai Yan roared. Their bodies turned into ice and fire as they fought again. Stop! However, right at this moment, a low growl sounded out. Following that, a powerful force appeared and forcefully pushed the two of them apart. Then, a figure in green appeared in the sky. Like a giant wall, it stood between Huang Ling and Lai Yan. Sister Yu. Huang Ling and Lai Yan shouted when they saw the figure in green. The person who had just appeared was their team leader, Su Yu. That's enough, you two. Is it worth it to fight to the death for a heartless man? Su Yu's face was cold as she growled. Huang Ling's face turned red. She couldn't speak. Is that so? Lai Yan sneered and said, Su Yu, I don't know who it was back then, but she loved the man that she said was heartless, to the point of dying. Lai Yan, Su Yu's face turned cold. She clenched her fists. Indeed, back then, she was also infatuated with Ming Yufeng. Hearing their conversation, Tion couldn't help but find it funny. He didn't know what kind of person Ming Yufeng was to make so many girls fall in love with him. At that moment, Su Yu suddenly screamed. Her body trembled as one of her arms was cut off. Half of her body was covered in blood. This sudden scene made Tion's pupils shrink. He saw a figure in black appear in the sky like a ghost. It was this person who suddenly attacked Su Yu and cut off her arm. Yenwen. Su Yu suddenly raised her head and looked at the black-clothed man high up in the sky. She coldly called out his name. It's that guy. Yenwen's appearance caused the expressions of everyone below to change, and they cried out in alarm. Yenwen is Ming Yufeng's follower. I heard he's the adopted son of the Ming clan. This guy has always been talking for Ming Yufeng. I wonder why he's making a move now. Ming Yufeng didn't show up, but Yenwen showed up. How interesting. Everyone discussed. They were all waiting to see a good show. Su Yu, this is a duel between young Master Feng's women. Outsiders are not allowed to interfere. Yenwen's entire body was hidden under the black cloak. He looked like a ghost. What do you mean? Su Yu's face darkened. She asked coldly. Their duel must continue. One of them must die. Only then will it end, Yenwen said hoarsely. Everyone's faces changed when they heard Yenwen's words. Chapter 42:14. Yenwen, you're ridiculous. Up in the sky, Su Yu's face was as dark as water. After hearing Yenwen's words, she roared cold. Su Yu, this has nothing to do with you. Yenwen's eyes were cold as he said, that was just a warning. If you dare to move again, I'll kill you. As soon as the naked threat was made, the atmosphere around him became strange, and there was even a hint of killing intent added to it. Su Yu's heart went cold. She could feel Yenwen's murderous intent. If she attacked again, Yenwen would really kill her. Yenwen was a member of the Ming clan, and this was related to the young master of the Ming clan, Ming Yufeng. Even if one or two people died, it wouldn't be a big deal. We're not dueling anymore. Just then, Huang Ling suddenly spoke. Her voice was trembling. It was clear that she was very nervous. Yes, we're not dueling anymore. Lai Yan reacted from the other side and followed. The two of them didn't have any intention of fighting to the death. Sometimes they were forced to do so. Now that Yenwen had appeared and forced them to fight to the death, they realized the seriousness of the situation. Not dueling anymore. Yenwen's eyes suddenly locked on a Huang Ling. His gaze was like two cold blades, making the latter feel an extremely cold pressure. Huang Ling's eyes trembled. Her mouth opened slightly, but she was so scared that she couldn't speak. If you don't duel, then both of you will die, Yenwen said coldly. A strange black mist surged around him. It seemed to be some kind of terrifying barrier. You? Huang Ling's face darkened. She suddenly felt her internal injuries and spat out a mouthful of blood. This is our business. What does it have to do with you? Lai Yin was still very calm. He growled in a low voice. He was testing the waters. Young Master Feng's woman doesn't even have the courage to die for him. Yin Yinwen smiled cold and said arrogantly, "That means you don't have the right to live." He spoke very fiercely, with a righteous and stern attitude, but in reality, he didn't know a damn thing. That Ming Yufeng fellow still hadn't appeared, but he had released a dog to force others to die for him. This was simply absurd. Yin Yinwen, so many people are watching. Don't get too many points. So you couldn't help but say cold. Courting death. Yin Yinwen's expression turned grim as her lips twitched. She spat out 2 ice-cold words. After that, her silhouette flickered as a black blade appeared in the air, sharp to the extreme. It tore through space, aiming to kill Suyu. In an instant, Suyu felt a bone-chilling aura of death approaching. She wanted to resist, but she discovered that her body had been locked down by a strange force, causing her to be unable to release the slightest bit of her strength. At this moment, she immediately understood that Yin Yinwen wanted to kill her as a warning to others. Bang! Just at the moment of life and death, a vigorous energy appeared and blocked the fatal attack, following which a silver-haired cultivator appeared. He was like a sharp sword, cold and incomparably sharp. Suyu looked at the figure in front of her. Her eyes couldn't help but tremble, and her heart couldn't help but warm. She didn't expect that someone would actually take the initiative to attack. All of you stand down. The person who attacked was Nie Tian. He spoke indifferently, and his body was surging with vigorous sword chi. He was fearless. The sudden scene caused the crowd below to be stunned for a moment. Then they began to shout and shout. Who is this? How dare he meddle in the Ming family's business? Is he tired of living? This kid isn't weak. He can actually block Yin Yinwen's attack. It seems that he is a tough one. So what if he is a tough one? No matter how tough he is, can he be tougher than the Ming family? The crowd discussed and looked at Nie Tian with playful eyes. The show in front of them seemed to be getting more and more interesting. Very good. Finally a tough one. Yin Yinwen's attack was blocked, but he sneered. His eyes revealed the joy of seeing a prey. The people below were all cowards who only cared about watching the show. It made him feel very bored. However, although he said playfully, he was a little afraid. He couldn't believe his eyes. The person who blocked his attack just now was actually a Tianyi Ninth Saint. A saint could actually block him, a ninth saint of heavenly tribulation. The person in front of him was definitely a peerless genius. Although Yin Yinwen was not considered an expert in the Bloodwing Academy, he was definitely not weak. At least in the Heavenly Tribulation Division, he was definitely one of the few. The Bloodwing Academy was divided into Tianyi Division, Heavenly Tribulation Division, and Heavenswell Division according to the strength of the martial artists. In fact, there was also a Sky Martial Arts Division, but there were very few people. After all, after reaching the Sky Martial Arts Divine Ancestor Realm, few people were willing to continue cultivating in the academy. Yin Yinwen rarely had opponents in the Heavenly Tribulation Division. Now that he was blocked by Tianyi Saint, he naturally couldn't help but feel apprehensive. This matter ends here. Nie Tian looked at Yin Yinwen and said calmly. However, his tone was domineering, as if he wasn't negotiating with her at all. Instead, he sounded more like he was giving her an order. Brat, who do you think you are? Yin Yinwen was furious. He roared, and the dark aura around him soared into the sky. Suddenly, a huge sword shadow appeared. It was like a rising dark mountain, and the moment it fell, it seemed like it was going to crush the whole world. Nie Tian frowned. He didn't dodge. Instead, he took a step forward. Suddenly, sword chi erupted around him, directly smashing the sword shadow and forcing Yin Yinwen to retreat dozens of meters. I'll say it one more time. That's enough. Nie Tian spoke again, his eyes filled with coldness. Although Yin Yinwen was at the 9th level of Heavenly Tribulation, his strength was far inferior to Zhu Shi and the All-Ghost Ancestor. Nie Tian could even defeat experts like Zhu Shi and the All-Ghost Ancestor in the Hidden Dragon competition. Why would he be afraid of Yin Yinwen? If he wanted to, Yin Yinwen would have been a corpse long ago. It was just that he had just arrived at the Bloodwing Academy and didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble, so he didn't do anything. But if Yin Yinwen didn't know when to stop, he didn't mind shocking him. Yin Yinwen steadied himself and looked at Nie Tian in shock. One could imagine the fear in his heart. Although he hadn't used his full strength in that attack just now, it was already very terrifying. But Nie Tian had actually used Sword Chi to force him back. It was too terrifying. He wasn't an idiot. He already understood that the difference in strength between him and Nie Tian was too great. He wasn't a match for the latter at all. The people below were also shocked. Many of them stared at Nie Tian as if they were looking at a monster. No one had expected this thorn that had suddenly appeared to be so fierce. Su Yu, Huang Ling, and Lai Yin were also shocked. 3 pairs of eyes stared at Nie Tian, completely speechless. Brat, leave your name behind. Yin Yinwen calmed down and suppressed her anger as she growled. Chapter 42:15. Hidden Dragon Wu Kuei. Everyone was shocked again when they heard this name. Their expressions became even more exaggerated as they looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes. It was as if the latter had turned from a monster to a demon. No one would have thought that the silver-haired martial artist in front of them was actually the hidden dragon Wu Kuei, who had recently risen to fame. Everyone was stunned for a few seconds before they reacted and started discussing. This guy is actually hidden dragon Wu Kuei. I really couldn't tell. He is only at the 9th level of Tianyi. How did he defeat Wu Kuei? I heard that in the Hidden Dragon competition not long ago, even the Hidden Sky ranking Zhu Shi participated. Could this guy be stronger than Zhu Shi? The crowd began to discuss among themselves as they looked at Nie Tian with unconcealable confusion and suspicion. They couldn't imagine that a 9th level Tianyi Great Lord could defeat the legendary Hidden Dragon. Let's go. Nie Tian looked at Yin Yinwen and said to Su Yu and the others behind him. Su Yu nodded and left with Huang Ling and Lai Yin with Nie Tian. The crowd looked at the 4 figures, and their expressions became strange again. This hidden dragon Wu Kuei is not simple. He just arrived at Bloodwing, and he already offended the young master of the Ming family. His days in the academy will not be peaceful. No matter what, he is still hidden dragon Wu Kuei. No matter how powerful the Ming family is, they won't dare to do anything to him. I heard that this guy made the 5 deans invite him to join their respective academies. I didn't expect him to choose Bloodwing Academy. Everyone had strange expressions. They were looking forward to the next confrontation between Nie Tian and the Ming family. Nie Tian, Su Yu, and the others entered Bloodwing Academy and walked on the wide Academy Avenue. Thank you for this time. Su Yu took a step forward when she saw that Nie Tian didn't say anything. Is your arm okay? Nie Tian looked at Su Yu and asked. It's fine. Su Yu smiled and said to Huang Ling and Lai Yin, but those 2 are badly injured. It was true that Su Yu had lost an arm, but it would soon grow back. However, Huang Ling and Lai Yin had fought with their lives on the line and were both injured. They would need at least a few months to recover. Huang Ling and Lai Yin blushed and lowered their heads in silence. After the battle, just now, they understood a lot and grew a lot. Your name is Huang Ling, right? Nie Tian looked at Huang Ling and asked. Yes. Seeing that Nie Tian took the initiative to show his concern, Huang Ling raised her head and looked at him. After nodding slightly, she seemed to have misunderstood something and blushed shyly. I have something to ask you. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he said directly. Huang Ling was taken aback at first, but she soon understood, and her face turned even redder. Then we'll be leaving first. So he was very smart. After saying that, she called Lai Yin and quickly left. You're from the 3 Life tribe? Nie Tian asked Huang Ling after Su Yu and Lai Yin disappeared. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Nie Tian felt that this girl called Huang Ling's facial features were somewhat similar to Cher's. Even the expression between her brows was somewhat charming. How did you know? Huang Ling asked in shock. She clearly didn't expect Nie Tian to be concerned about the 3 Life tribe. Nie Tian didn't know where to start, So he said tentatively, I have some connections with the Three Lives race, but I heard that they were wiped out a long time ago. Huang Ling calmed down and sighed. I don't know much about the Three Life tribe. My family has never allowed us to say that we're from the Three Life tribe. Now, our family is called the Reincarnation tribe. The Reincarnation tribe. Nie Tian couldn't help but tremble when he heard that name. Cher was the reincarnation protector of the Three Life tribe. He even had the Three Life tribe's supreme treasure, the Seven Night Samsara, in his body. He was very sure that Huang Ling's family was the Three Life tribe. How many people are there in your family? Nie Tian frowned and asked. Huang Ling's eyes flickered. She was clearly wary of this silver-haired martialist. After hesitating for a long time, she said, I don't know. I want to visit your family. Is that okay? Nie Tian could tell that Huang Ling was worried, so he asked directly. This? Huang Ling was stunned. She didn't know how to answer. The Reincarnation tribe had a taboo. They didn't allow outsiders to enter their territory. Understand. Thank you, Nie Tian said with a faint smile, not forcing the matter. Huang Ling didn't say anything. She didn't know what to do. Nie Tian chuckled and changed the subject. I need to see the dean about something. Do you know where he is? The dean is in the Bloodwing Dao Valley, but ordinary people aren't allowed to go there, Huang Ling said timidly as she looked at Nie Tian. Many thanks, Nie Tian said with a faint smile. Then, he still felt a little worried. He sent Huang Ling back to her residence before heading to the Bloodwing Dao Valley. The Bloodwing Academy was huge. It was almost the size of a small city. Along the way, Nie Tian asked several people before he arrived at the Bloodwing Dao Valley. This place is somewhat similar to the Bloodwing Dao Valley. Nie Tian looked at the hidden valley in front of him and muttered with a smile. He had been to the Bloodwing Dao Valley before and found that the Bloodwing Dao Valley in front of him was similar. However, the Bloodwing Dao Valley had traces of being man-made. It seemed that the dean, Xinguang Muxue, had done this intentionally. Disciple Nie Tian requests an audience with the dean. Nie Tian took a deep breath and spoke in a clear voice. His majestic voice spread throughout the Dao Valley. Nie Tian, come in. A moment later, Xinguang Muxue's voice came from the Dao Valley, allowing Nie Tian to enter. Nie Tian stepped into the Bloodwing Dao Valley. Following a straight path, he soon arrived at a pavilion in the middle of the valley. In the pavilion, a white-robed figure stood calmly. It was Bloodwing's dean, Xinguang Muxue. Dean. Nie Tian bowed slightly to show his respect. Since he was already a disciple of the Bloodwing Academy, he naturally had to be more humble in front of the dean. Nie Tian, you're finally here. I thought you wouldn't come to the Bloodwing Academy. Xinguang Muxue smiled faintly and said somewhat excitedly, Since I've agreed to come to the Bloodwing Academy, I naturally won't go back on my word. Nie Tian smiled faintly and no longer spoke nonsense. He directly asked, Dean, you've met my friend, Jun Jinxing, right? Jun Jinxing? Xinguang Muxue was stunned for a moment. After thinking for a long time, he finally had an impression of this name. He said, I've been cultivating in the Dao Valley and haven't seen him. You haven't seen him? Nie Tian's gaze trembled violently, and he felt that something was wrong. Although he had already guessed that something had happened to Jun Jinxing, he was still very surprised when he confirmed it. Jun Jinxing was a man of his word. The fact that none of the 5 deans had appeared in the ancestral dragon's abyss meant that something had happened to him. Nie Tian, what happened? Xinguang Muxue couldn't help but ask when he saw that Nie Tian's expression wasn't right. Chapter 42:16. Xinguang Muxue only reacted after a long while. The gaze he used to look at Nie Tian could not help but change. There were traces of reverence in his eyes. He knew that the young cultivator before him had saved the entire all-heaven sacred world. In that case, Jun Jinxing did not come to the everlasting sacred world. Nie Tian mumbled, worried about Jun Jinxing. At the very least, he did not come to Cloud Peak City. At this moment, he could not help but worry because Jun Jinxing should not have disappeared. Moreover, ever since he came to the everlasting sacred world, he had been paying attention, but there was no aura of astral soul resonance. Nie Tian, don't worry too much. I will send someone to help you look for little friend Jun Jianxing. Xingguang Muxue could tell that Jun Jianxing was very important to Niet Tian, so he nodded. Thank you, Lord Dean. Niet Tian bowed in thanks, but the worry on his face did not lessen in the slightest. Niet Tian, you have just arrived at the Bloodwing Academy. Go to the sundries department later and ask them to arrange a place for you to stay. Xingguang Muxue looked at Niet Tian and smiled faintly. Since you have chosen the Bloodwing Academy, I will naturally not mistreat you. Many thanks. Niet Tian expressed his gratitude once again and then left without another word. Not long after he left, Xingguang Muxue's expression changed slightly. He asked in a heavy voice, Night Wind, what's the matter? Lord Dean, he had some conflict with the young master of the Ming clan. An illusory voice rang out in the air, then recounted the fight between Niet Tian and Yin Yinwen. It turned out that ever since Niet Tian came to the Bloodwing Academy, his every move had been observed by others. Hearing Yi Feng's words, Xingguang Muxue fell silent for a moment, not saying a word. Lord Dean, do we need to inform the Ming clan to restrain themselves? Night Wind's voice rang out again, respectfully. Niet Tian was a hidden dragon after all, and Xingguang Muxue valued him greatly. It would not be good if something happened to him. No need. Unexpectedly, Xingguang Muxue waved her hand, and a deep smile crept onto her lips. These clans are deeply rooted in the academy, making them very difficult to deal with. Niet Tian is a sharp sword. He might be able to help. Are you saying that we should use Niet Tian to suppress these clans? Night Wind's voice echoed out, filled with confusion and surprise. Just keep an eye on them. Don't expose yourself unless it's necessary. Night Muxue's voice rang out. Yes, Night Wind replied. Then, his aura disappeared as if he had never appeared. Xingguang Muxue's eyes flickered with anticipation as she said, Niet Tian, the Bloodwing Academy's waters are too deep and muddy. I hope that you'll be able to stir up 1,000 ripples. At the same time, Niet Tian walked out of the Bloodwing Dao Valley and headed straight for the miscellaneous items department. Niet Tian. At this moment, a familiar figure appeared. Sui was pleasantly surprised and seemed very excited. Niet Tian laughed. Senior Sister Suyu, why are you looking for me? You just came to the academy. I'm afraid you don't know anything, so I came to give you some pointers, Suyu said with a lively smile. Thank you, Senior Sister. Niet Tian slightly nodded. He suddenly discovered that Suyu's severed arm had recovered. He didn't ask too much. After all, with Suyu's cultivation, she had many ways to recover her severed arm. You're going to the miscellaneous items department, right? Follow me. Suyu smiled and led the way. Niet Tian slowly followed. As he walked, he asked Suyu about the Bloodwing Academy. It turned out that the Bloodwing Academy was divided into many divisions. For example, the disciples were divided into the Heavenly Justice Division, the Heavenly Calamity Division, the Heavenly Perception Division, and the Heaven Martial Division. However, there weren't many people in the Heaven Martial Division. Moreover, they didn't cultivate in the academy, so they were usually ignored. As for Bloodwing Academy, it implemented a point system. Normally, a disciple that had just entered the academy would only have 1 point. Afterwards, they would carry out some missions for the academy or participate in some academy competitions and the like to earn points. When they had accumulated 100 points, regardless of their strength, they could choose to leave. Open an academy. Senior Sister Su, how many credits do you have now? Niet Tian glanced at Suyu and asked with a faint smile. I only have 3 credits. Suyu blushed and said with some embarrassment, not even as many as you have. Huh? Niet Tian frowned and asked in confusion, don't I only have 1 credit? That's for ordinary disciples. You're the hidden dragon Marshal Kuei. You have 10 credits the moment you entered the academy. Suyu curled her lips slightly and looked at Niet Tian seriously. I really don't understand. You're clearly only at the 9th level of heavenly righteousness. How did you defeat that monster Zhu Shi? You know Zhu Shi? Niet Tian couldn't help but ask. I met him once. Suyu suddenly blushed. She was actually a little nervous. Her heart seemed to be beating faster. Niet Tian smiled. He immediately understood that the girl in front of him seemed to be obsessed with Zhu Shi. But to be honest, with Zhu Shi's talent and strength, he probably wouldn't fancy Suyu. It was true that Suyu wasn't weak and her talent wasn't bad. But compared to Zhu Shi, she was far inferior. Nietian, I heard that in the last battle of the Hidden Dragon contest, you only used one move to defeat Zhu Shi. Is that true? Suyu looked at Nietian and asked curiously. Nietian laughed and said, we were evenly matched. I only won by a hair's breadth. Oh, Suyu nodded and continued to ask. I also heard that in the beginning, you fought with Zhu Shi once. You couldn't even get within 1,000 meters of him. How did your strength increase so much that you even defeated him? Nietian froze for a moment. He didn't think these things would spread so far. He forced a smile and said, luck was good. Just luck. Suyu's brows were tightly knitted together. She clearly doubted Nietian's words. Afraid that Suyu would continue asking, Nietian pointed to a majestic building in the distance and said, we've arrived at the sundry department. Suyu looked over and immediately became excited. She said, I want to see if that stingy old man in the sundry department will give you the best courtyards. Bloodwing Academy disciples would be allocated a cultivation residence after entering the academy. Ordinary disciples naturally only had ordinary residences. However, Nietian was the hidden dragon Marshal Kuei. Naturally, his treatment would be different. The two quickly arrived outside the sundry department. They saw two figures walk out, one in black and one in white. The black-clothed cultivator was not unfamiliar. It was Yin Yanwen. Chapter 42:17. Looking at Su Yu's sudden panic, Nietian could not help but frown as he sized up the man in white. The man in white was handsome, but he did not have a heroic aura. Instead, he had a gloomy aura about him. His eyes were not black, but a strange deep blue that made him look sinister. Nietian's first reaction was that this man in white was Ming Yufeng. Otherwise, Su Yu wouldn't be so flustered. Just then, Yin Yanwen whispered something to the man in white before the two of them walked over to Nietian and Su Yu. Su Yu was evidently afraid as she instinctively leaned towards Nietian, looking at the man in white with a fearful gaze as though he was a monster. Hidden Dragon Nietian, I am Qian Sun. Nice to meet you. Unexpectedly, the white-robed cultivator walked over. However, he was very polite and had a faint smile on his face as he spoke. Nice to meet you. Nietian's gaze trembled slightly as he replied indifferently. He was surprised that this person wasn't Ming Yufeng. However, for Yin Yanwen to be so respectful before Qian Sun, it meant that Qian Sun's identity was far from ordinary. I heard from my friend Yin Yanwen that there's some misunderstanding between the two of you. I wonder if the two of you can shake hands and make peace on account of this lowly one? Qian Sun's face was full of smiles as he spoke sincerely. Nietian's lips twitched as he smiled faintly. There's no misunderstanding between the two of us, so there's no need for us to shake hands and make peace. I just can't stand him, and even more so, the young master of the Ming family behind him. If they wish to take revenge, feel free to come. I'll keep them company at all times. Even though this Qian Sun before him had disguised himself well, how could Nietian not tell that this person was a classic smiling tiger? He was definitely a ruthless character with a dagger in his back. The reason why he was so polite was probably because he was wary of Nietian's identity as a hidden dragon Marshal Kuei. If Nietian's reaction was warm and sincere, he would have fallen right into his trap. Because once Nietian wanted to make peace, it was a sign of cowardice. It meant that he was afraid. On the contrary, the more powerful Nietian was, the more Gan Sun feared him. Qian Sun clearly didn't expect Nietian to have such a reaction. His expression instantly changed, and his eyes flickered with a sinister light, as if he wanted to see something from Nietian. So he was also stunned. She didn't think that Qian Sun would take the initiative to ask for peace, nor did she think that Nietian would reject him so decisively. From her point of view, it was an accident that Nietian was involved in this matter. If Qian Sun were to make peace, it would be a good chance to resolve the crisis. Why would she say no? Stinking brat. You don't know how to appreciate favors. Yin Yinwen was stunned for a moment before she reacted and growled like a wild beast. However, he only dared to roar and did not dare to make a move. He already knew of Nye Tian's strength and was deeply afraid of him. Qian Sun stared at Nye Tian for long, while before his gloomy expression gradually calmed down and he smiled coldly. So it seems that Brother Nye is determined to be our enemy. I won't take the initiative to provoke you, but if you provoke me, I definitely won't be polite. Nye Tian didn't avoid Qian Sun at all. Very well. Qian Sun's eyes turned cold. You're the first person in the academy who dares to speak to me like this. Let's go. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he strode away. Su Yu hurriedly followed. Young Master Qian, why don't you just kill this brat? Yin Yanwen looked at Nye Tian's back and asked with a sinister expression, Are you an idiot? Qian Sun rebuked coldly. This is the academy. There's so many eyes watching. He's the hidden dragon Wu Kuei. How can those ordinary disciples compare to him? If I kill him here, it'll be the same as slapping the academy's face. Even the dean will be alarmed. This. Yin Yanwen's face stiffened. She hurriedly lowered her head. Young Master Qian has thought things through. I was too rash. Don't worry. He won't be far from death after offending our Bloodwing, ninth young master. The corner of Yin Yanwen's mouth twitched. Her deep blue eyes flickered with an extremely sinister light. He didn't attack Nye Tian just now because he was afraid of some of the academy's rules. However, that wasn't the main reason. Most importantly, he sensed a power from Nye Tian that even he was extremely wary of. Nye Tian was only at the 9th level of heavenly righteousness, but he was able to make him feel threatened. This had already crossed his taboo. Such a person had to be eliminated even at the risk of alarming the dean. However, Qian Sun was afraid that even if he attacked, he might not be able to kill Nye Tian. He naturally knew that Nye Tian was someone who had defeated the heaven subduer Zhu Shi. Qian Sun was much older than Zhu Shi, but he was also on the Hidden Sky ranking several hundred years ago. He had once lost to Zhu Shi. How could he not be wary of someone who could defeat Zhu Shi? Let's go. Take me to your young master. Qian Sun smiled coldly and left with Yin Yanwen. On the other side, Nye Tian and Su Yu arrived at the entrance of the miscellaneous items department. Nye Tian, why didn't you make peace with Qian Sun? Su Yu calmed down when she saw Qian Sun and Yin Yanwen disappear. What's the relationship between this Qian Sun and Ming Yufeng? Nye Tian didn't answer her question. They're sworn brothers, right? They're both Bloodwing, 9th young master. Su Yu frowned. Bloodwing, 9th young master? Nye Tian frowned. He couldn't help but be interested. Yes. Su Yu nodded. Only now did she realize that Nye Tian had just arrived at the Bloodwing Academy, so of course he didn't know anything. Therefore, she explained, the Bloodwing clan is an alliance formed by the descendants of various aristocratic families. Among them, the 9 people with the most prominent status and strength are called the Bloodwing Young Lords. Ming Yufeng and Qian Sun are both Bloodwing, 9th young master, so they have a lot of power in the academy. Many of the teachers and elders are from the Bloodwing, 9th young master's family. So that's how it is. Nye Tian faintly smiled. His lips curled into a profound smile as he said inwardly, Lord Dean, it seems like you want to use me to suppress the powers of the families in the academy. It turned out that when Nye Tian walked out of the Bloodwing Dao Valley, he already sensed an aura following him. This aura was very well hidden. If it was just Nye Tian, he definitely wouldn't be able to discover it. However, the Eternal Night Fox, Fat Cat, and the Ghost Emperor alerted him. Nye Tian guessed that this aura was sent by Xinguang Muxue to protect him. In other words, Xinguang Muxue already knew about the conflict between him and Yin Yanwen, but he didn't directly interfere. At this moment, combined with Su Yu's words, it seemed that Xinguang Muxue, the dean, was being restrained by various forces in the academy. Otherwise, Ming Yufeng and the other Bloodwing, 9th young masters wouldn't be so arrogant. Therefore, Nye Tian boldly guessed that Xinguang Muxue wanted to use him to suppress these families. Nye Tian didn't want to make peace with Qian Sun. On one hand, he didn't want to show cowardice. On the other hand, He knew that these arrogant young masters wouldn't just swallow their grievances. Whether he made peace or not, Ming Yufeng and the others wouldn't let him go. Since that was the case, why should he show weakness? Chapter 42:18. The Bloodwing young masters are very close and have always been a single unit. Suyu couldn't help but ask when she saw the thoughtful look on Ye Tian's face. Since Qian Xian wants to make peace with you, Ming Yufeng won't have any objections. She had never seen anyone treat the Bloodwing young masters like this, so she couldn't help but be more interested in Ye Tian. If you snatch a piece of meat from a wolf's mouth and the wolf takes the initiative to make peace with you, do you think it's normal? Ye Tian asked the naive girl with a faint smile. No, it's not normal. Suyu was stunned at first, then shook her head. With a faint smile, Ye Tian said, that settles it. Then, he walked into the miscellaneous goods section. Oh, you mean Ming Yufeng and Qinsen are wolves? Suyu thought for a long time before coming to a realization and chased after him. Ye Tian was in a good mood after leaving the miscellaneous department. But Suyu pouted, looking very dissatisfied. It must be Qinsen's doing. That's why he only gave you an earth courtyard. The courtyards the Bloodwing Academy prepared for its disciples were divided into 4 levels. Heaven, Earth, Profound, and Yellow. Ye Tian was given an earth courtyard called the Flowing Rain Court. Ye Tian thought it was pretty good, but Suyu was very dissatisfied. She thought he should be given a heaven-grade courtyard. Senior sister, it's just a place to live. There's no need to care so much. Ye Tian comforted her with a faint smile. You don't know, but there's a big difference between a place to live and a place to live. Those heaven-grade courtyards are all built in places with the densest concentration of saint energy. Furthermore, they have all kinds of formations supporting them. They're very beneficial to a cultivator's cultivation. Let me put it to you this way. If 2 people with similar talent and strength are in a heaven-ranked courtyard and an earth-ranked courtyard, then in less than a month, the one in the heaven-ranked courtyard will definitely be stronger than the one in the earth-ranked courtyard. Ye Tian frowned, but still didn't take it to heart. With a smile, he said, Are you exaggerating? Suyu was very angry and said, You now have the opportunity to live in a heavenly courtyard, which is the dream of countless people. Ever since the establishment of Bloodwing Academy, there had never been a hidden dragon Marshal Kuei who lived in an inner courtyard. You tell that old man that if he doesn't give you the heavenly grade courtyard, you'll die. Inform the dean. He won't be able to bear the consequences, so he'll definitely give it to you. Ye Tian looked at the agitated Suyu with a calm expression. He smiled and said, Senior sister, it's fine. I'm used to living a bitter life. It doesn't matter where I cultivate. You are really infuriating. Suyu glared at Ye Tian, momentarily a loss for words. Her face was filled with anger. He could have stayed in a heaven-grade courtyard, but he insisted on staying in an earth-grade courtyard. Wasn't he stupid? Senior sister, please accompany me to take a look at the Flowing Rain Court. Ye Tian didn't care at all. He didn't have any requirements for a place to cultivate. Moreover, he didn't know how much time he would have to stay in the Flowing Rain Court. Fine. Suyu couldn't do anything about Ye Tian, so she agreed in a bad mood. The 2 immediately went to the Flowing Rain Court. Soon, Ye Tian and Suyu arrived at the painting grounds. All the earth-grade courtyards of Bloodwing Academy were here. This is the place. After a while, the 2 arrived outside a unique courtyard. Suyu couldn't help but feel excited and directly walked in. The saint energy aura here is indeed much denser than outside. Moreover, there's some kind of mysterious formation circulating in space and time. It coincides with the hundreds of meridians, 12 major meridians, and 9 major yuan meridians of the human body. It's extremely beneficial for cultivators' cultivation. Ye Tian wasn't in a hurry. He carefully sensed the surrounding aura and walked into the courtyard with a smile. The courtyard. As soon as he stepped into the courtyard, he smelled a dense fragrance that seeped into his heart and spleen. Immediately, he felt an indescribable sense of comfort, as though all the pores on his body had opened up. Like dried-up land, he absorbed the saint energy to his heart's content. Apart from that, the layout of the small courtyard was very unique and elegant. There were pavilions and terraces, strange flowers and plants, small bridges, and flowing water. This place is indeed very suitable for cultivation. Tian couldn't help but nod his head as he looked around. Heavens, an Earth-grade courtyard is already so good. How good would a heaven-grade courtyard be? She was very excited. She walked left and right, wishing she could walk around the entire courtyard. She was just an ordinary disciple. Moreover, her talent wasn't too outstanding. She only stayed in a yellow-grade courtyard. Moreover, it was shared with a few other girls. It was the first time she came to an Earth-grade courtyard. It was inevitable that she would be excited. Tian looked around. He was very satisfied with the flowing rain court. He wanted to break through to the heavenly tribulation Saint King level. This was indeed a good place to cultivate. Junior brother Tian, senior sister has something to discuss with you. After a while, Suyu calmed down. She suddenly came to Tian's side and said with an evil smile, "Senior sister, please speak." Tian smiled faintly. He didn't know what this girl was planning. You see, you have so many rooms here. You wouldn't mind having one more person live here, right? Suyu smiled shyly and asked tentatively, "Senior sister, you and I are men and women. Living in the same courtyard, it doesn't seem appropriate." Tian frowned. He couldn't help but blush. Suyu looked at Tian and frowned. She said in a bad mood, "What are you thinking? Who wants to live with you?" Tian was startled. He said in surprise, "Didn't you just say that? I want one more person to live here. I didn't say I wanted to live here myself." Suyu was speechless. She said directly, "My brother just came to school, but he is in the worst courtyard, the Huang courtyard. I want him to live here with you." "Oh." Tian suddenly realized and smiled awkwardly. But Suyu didn't hold back. She just met him, and she already brought up her conditions. No wonder this girl was so enthusiastic about showing Tian around. So she had this trick up her sleeve. When Suyu saw that Tian didn't live in the sky courtyard, she was very angry. It probably had something to do with her brother. Suyu looked at Tian, her bright eyes glittering with a strange light. "Oh, so you agree? Let him come." Tian smiled and agreed. After all, he wouldn't be staying in the flowing rain court for too long. It was good to have one more person to look after the house. "Okay, then it's settled. I will ask him to move here." Suyu smiled happily and skipped out. Is there need to be so excited? Tian looked at Suyu's back and couldn't help but laugh helplessly. He didn't know how big a thing it was for an ordinary disciple to live in an earth courtyard. Then, Tian checked the flowing rain court and chose a room. He then entered 9 extremes to take a look. Then, he started cultivating in the small courtyard. He planned to use 3 days to break through to the Heaven Tribulation Sage King realm. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. In the courtyard, Tian stood up. He didn't look good. In the past 3 days, he tried to break through to the Heaven Tribulation realm. But he failed again and again. He always failed at the most crucial moment. Actually, according to his previous speed, he should have broken through to the Heaven Tribulation realm long ago. But there were too many different powers in his body. They were mixed together, and it was hard to control. So, it was extremely difficult to break through to the next realm. The Heaven Tribulation realm seemed to have become his bottleneck. Tian. Just as Tian was frowning, a voice suddenly sounded. Then, a figure rushed over. It was Suyu. "Senior sister Su, what's wrong?" Tian couldn't help but frown when he saw Suyu sweating and very nervous. Chapter 42:19. Suyu was very flustered. It was obvious that she cared a lot about her little brother. This appeared. Tian frowned. He had Suyu calm down and said, "Explain clearly what happened." Suyu hurriedly nodded and said, 5 days ago, my little brother went to Yamong Mountain with a few of his teammates to gain experience. He was supposed to come back 3 days ago, but his friends all came back and only he didn't." "Didn't you ask those people?" Tian asked in a low voice. "I did." Suyu was very anxious. "They all said that my little brother returned early from Mount Yumming." Tian's expression darkened. After a moment, he said, "Take me to see those people." "Yes, yes." Suyu repeatedly nodded. "Tian, I have a bad premonition. Did something happen to my little brother? I will definitely help you find him." Tian nodded and quickly walked out of the flowing rain court. Soon, Suyu and Tian arrived at the Yellow Sea of Awareness, where all the Huang rank courtyards of Bloodwing Academy were located. Next, the two arrived at the courtyard of Su Yu's little brother. Before the two of them entered the courtyard, they saw three black-clothed martial artists walking over. When they saw that it was Su Yu, they had a very impatient look on their faces. One of them said, "We have already told you that Su Lin returned to the academy early. He isn't here right now. We don't know what happened. Su Lin clearly went to Mount Yumming with you. Why did he return early?" Although Su Yu was anxious, she still wanted to reason with them. "How should I know? Maybe he hooked up with some girl and has been staying elsewhere these days." The other person smiled cold, his face full of disdain. "Impossible. My little brother isn't that kind of person." Su Yu was on the verge of tears. "We don't know what kind of person he is." That person sneered again, his eyes turning cold. "However, if you come to bother us again, don't blame us for being impolite." Su Yu was so angry that her face turned red. She wanted to step on these people's heads and ask them where Su Lin was. "What about me?" That person was very arrogant and looked at Su Yu with disdain. But at this moment, he suddenly felt a black shadow appear in front of him. Then he felt an intense pressure on his neck. A hand had actually grabbed his neck like an iron clamp. "Nie Tian." Su Yu was taken aback by the sudden turn of events and couldn't help but exclaim. How could she have imagined that Nie Tian's methods would be so direct and violent? The other two were stunned by the scene in front of them. They immediately reacted and wanted to attack, but they were intimidated by the surging sword intent around Nie Tian, not daring to move. "Where is he?" Nie Tian grabbed the man's neck and asked coldly. His eyes were filled with the ferocity of a wild beast. Who are you?" That person's face turned red as he struggled to speak. However, he immediately felt the hand gripping his throat even tighter, almost suffocating him. "You have one more chance to speak. If you say the wrong thing, you die." Nie Tian's eyes were cold as he stared at that person like a sharp knife. Su Lin is dead. That person finally realized that Nie Tian really dared to kill him. He opened his mouth with difficulty and spat out a few words that shocked Su Yu. "Impossible." Su Yu's eyes trembled. As if she was struck by lightning, she screamed out loud. Nie Tian slightly loosened his grip on that person's neck and asked coldly, "Is what you said true? His body is still here." That person was like a frightened sheep looking at Nie Tian and said with a trembling voice, "Take me to him." Nie Tian's face was cold as he carried that person into the yard. A moment later, the other two people carried out a bloody body and placed it on the ground in the yard. The body had not decomposed yet, indicating that it had just died. "Shaolin." Su Yu looked at the body on the ground and suddenly reacted. She screamed and threw herself on top of it. Although the face of the body could no longer be seen, she was very sure that this was her younger brother, Su Lin. Nie Tian frowned as he looked at Su Yu, who had lost control of her emotions, and said nothing. After a long time, when Su Yu had calmed down a little, Nie Tian looked at the three people and said solemnly, "Speak. What happened?" That person looked at Nie Tian with a terrified expression and began to narrate the cause and effect. It turned out that Su Lin had returned with them 3 days ago, but as soon as they returned to their residence, a martial artist came looking for Su Lin and tortured him to death in front of them, leaving his body behind. After that, that person left without saying anything. The three of them had originally planned to inform the Institute of this matter, but they were afraid of that person's revenge, so they wanted to hide it. "Yes, sir, it really has nothing to do with us. We just don't want to cause trouble." After that person finished speaking, he looked at Nie Tian with a crying face, trying to act pitiful. What did the person who killed Su Lin look like? Nie Tian's face was solemn as he asked in a cold tone. That person was wearing a black robe, and I couldn't see his face clearly. His movements were strange, like a ghost, and his voice was very hoarse and ear-piercing. That person said as he recalled, "In Yenwen." Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he said a name. "It seems to be this person." That person's eyes flickered, and he said, "What else did he say?" "Your sister shouldn't have gone against young Master Feng." Nie Tian's face was solemn. He had already confirmed that the person who killed Su Lin was In Yenwen. It was obvious that In Yenwen did this because Su stopped Huang Ling and Lai Yan's duel a few days ago. Perhaps there was another reason. and that was because Suyu was too close to Nyetian. Yin, you bastard, I'm going to kill you. At that moment, Suyu realized what was going on. She roared and rushed out. Nyetian's expression changed. He looked at the three people and said in a cold tone, "Follow me." The three people's expressions changed as they felt a bone-piercing chill. They immediately nodded. Nyetian brought the three people with him and immediately followed Suyu. Suyu was furious. She moved very quickly and arrived outside a courtyard in the land of painting. She shouted in a loud voice, "Yin, get out here right now." Nyetian and the three people followed behind Suyu. Nyetian took a step forward and looked at Suyu, signaling her not to be too impulsive. However, he knew that this kind of warning was obviously useless. If he put himself in her shoes, he wouldn't be able to control himself if someone close to him had been killed. At that moment, a figure in black floated over like a ghost. It was Yin. There were three other cultivators behind him. All of them looked ferocious, and their auras were surging. "What? Are you here to avenge your brother?" Yin saw Suyu and did not hide anything. Instead, he smiled cold and was extremely provocative. He was not afraid of being exposed at all. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let the three people live. Chapter 42:20. Suyu was enraged. The power in her body exploded instantly, and she struck out with her palm. It was like a raging wave, pressing towards Yin, courting death. The corner of Yin's mouth twitched slightly. His figure flickered like a ghost, and with a strange movement technique, he dodged Suyu's palm and appeared behind her. Suyu suddenly felt a bone-piercing chill behind her. Her pretty face changed, but it was already impossible for her to counterattack. In midair, Yin smiled coldly. A crescent moon blade appeared in his hand, and he slashed out instantly, attacking Suyu. This attack was merciless. He wanted to kill Suyu directly. In the Bloodwing Academy, private fights between disciples were not allowed. If there were any unresolved grudges, they could go to the life and death hunting ground, where they could kill wantonly. However, according to the Academy rules, killing in the Academy would be severely punished. It was possible to cripple one's cultivation or even pay with one's life. Therefore, ordinary people would not easily kill in the Academy. But Yin was an exception. Perhaps the people from a Ming family or the Bloodwing Ninth Young Master had ignored the Academy rules and killed countless people, but had never been punished. It was precisely because of this that Yin dared to kill Su Lin so insolently. In his eyes, killing Su Lin was just for Suyu, and at the same time to remind Nyetian that the Bloodwing Ninth Young Master was not to be trifled with. Just as Yin's fatal strike was about to land, suddenly a surge of sword chi soared into the sky, like a dragon raging in the night, and the whole world shook. Bang! Then, with a muffled sound, Yin flew out directly, smashing heavily on the ground, leaving a trail of blood that was more than 10 meters long. Nyetian took a step out, standing upright like a giant sword. Yoop! Yin struggled to get up, and just as he was about to speak, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Nyetian had only attacked with a surge of sword chi, and had actually seriously injured him. The three warriors who lived in the same courtyard as Yin were shocked by the scene in front of them, and seemed to doubt their eyes. Yin was a ninth heaven tribulation king, and this silver-haired warrior was only at the ninth heaven righteousness realm. How could he seriously injure Yin with his aura? "I'll kill you." At this time, Suyu roared and wanted to rush towards Yin. However, she was stopped by Nyetian. "I'll bring him to the Academy's law enforcement department," Nyetian said solemnly as he looked at Suyu. "No, I'm going to kill him right here." Suyu roared, her eyes bloodshot. She knew that it was impossible for Yin to die once she reached the law enforcement department. The reason why Yin and the others dared to be so insolent was because of the protection of the law enforcement department elders. Nearly half of the entire law enforcement department members were from the aristocratic families behind the Bloodwing Nine Young Master, and the other half were related to these aristocratic families. The reason why the Bloodwing Young Master 9 could do as he pleased in the Academy was because of the connivance of the law enforcement department. "You killed him." So you have to die too. Tian frowned and said coldly. Previously, he had heard Suyu mention some of the Bloodwing Academy's rules. Therefore, he hadn't directly killed Yin Yenwen. Tian, if you don't kill me now, you won't be able to kill me once we reach the law enforcement department. Yin Yenwen sneered, clearly provoking the limits of Tian's patience. Tian's expression suddenly turned cold. Two beams of sword energy whistled out. Yin Yenwen's legs trembled, and he knelt down, his knees shattering. I won't kill me, but I can make things difficult for you. Tian's face was cold, his eyes glinting with a ferocious light, like a wild beast. Next, he no longer hesitated. Carrying Yin Yenwen, he headed for the law enforcement department. Yin Yenwen's three companions blindly followed behind, not daring to make a move. So you calmed down slightly. In the end, she could only follow behind Tian. Soon, they arrived outside the law enforcement hall. Several law enforcement department cultivators appeared, blocking Tian's group. What's going on? One of the law enforcement cultivators immediately recognized Yin Yenwen and stared at Tian with a gloomy face. He killed someone in the academy. I brought him to the law enforcement hall to be punished. Tian replied cold, not the slightest bit afraid. Preposterous. The man growled and said, You said he killed someone, so he killed someone? Is there any evidence? Are there any witnesses? The three of them are witnesses, Tian said solemnly, looking at the people who lived with Su Lin. You saw Yin Yenwen kill someone? The law enforcement cultivator's eyes turned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He stared at the three people and asked, We. The three people were obviously timid. They were so scared that they couldn't speak. Speak. The law enforcement cultivator growled, and the coercion became stronger. We didn't. The three people opened their mouths, but they suddenly felt a terrible, sword-intent lock on them. It was actually carrying the aura of death. Speak the truth. Tian looked at them and said word by word. We saw it. Yin Yenwen killed Su Lin. The three people immediately opened their mouths, and their faces were pale with fear. They knew that Tian was a ruthless character, and he might really kill them directly. The law enforcement cultivator, of course, knew that Tian was threatening the three people. He turned to look at Tian, but the latter didn't avoid him at all. Instead, he looked at him coldly and said, I want to see the law enforcement elder. How dare you? Do you think you can see the law enforcement elder just because you say so? The law enforcement cultivator was very arrogant, and he scolded cold. If the law enforcement elder doesn't come to enforce the law, then why does the academy need the law enforcement elder? Tian's face was cold, and he said coldly. The law enforcement cultivator was so scared that his face changed, and his body involuntarily took a few steps back. What's going on outside? It's so noisy. At this time, a low voice came from the law enforcement hall. It was filled with anger. Elder Ming, someone said that Yin Yenwen killed someone, and he wants to see the law enforcement elder. The law enforcement cultivator immediately turned around and bowed. Bring him into the hall. The voice in the law enforcement hall was silent for a while before it came out again. Let's go. The law enforcement cultivator turned around and looked at Tian. He smiled coldly, and there was a strange expression on his face. Tian wasn't afraid at all. He carried Yin Yenwen and strode into the law enforcement hall. The law enforcement hall was spacious and dignified. In the middle of the main seat sat a middle-aged cultivator with strong facial features. His hair was like iron needles, and he exuded a cold majesty. Elder Ming, this is the person. The law enforcement cultivator bowed and said respectfully. The person called Elder Ming stood up, and his eyes suddenly stared at the seriously injured Yin Yenwen. The muscles at the corners of his mouth twitched a few times, and then he fixed his gaze on Tian. He said cold, You injured him? The cold voice carried an extreme sense of oppression, and people couldn't help but feel pressured. The expressions of Su Yu and the others changed, and they trembled with fear. However, Tian nodded slightly with a grim expression on his face. Chapter 42:21. In the law enforcement hall, Elder Ming stared at Tian with a gloomy face and said, You know what I'm asking. You also know what my answer is. Tian looked straight at Elder Ming fearlessly and said, Yinwen's identity and the people behind him have nothing to do with me. I only know that he's a murderer. He must pay the price. Elder Ming felt the threatening aura in Tian's eyes and could not help but tremble. His expression stiffened and he said, Then do you know who I am? You're the law enforcement elder. You should uphold the school's laws and punish anyone who violates the school's rules, Tian said seriously as he looked at the elder. Elder Ming was stunned again and was speechless for a moment. He did not think that Tian would actually say that. He had been the law enforcement elder for so many years, and this was the first time someone dared to speak to him like that. But then, he changed his expression and asked with a smile, Then in your opinion, how should I punish Yinwen? Kill. Tian's eyes darkened, and he said in a cold tone, Yinwen publicly killed someone in the school and violated the school's rules. If he is not killed, it will not be enough to uphold the law and pacify the people. Elder Ming's eyes trembled again. He felt an indomitable determination on Tian's face, and it made him feel uneasy. Elder Ming was silent for a few seconds and suddenly asked, What's your name? Tian. Tian did not avoid anything and said in a deep voice. Hearing this name, Elder Ming's expression changed again and again. A trace of coldness surged in his eyes as he smiled evilly and said, So you're this time's hidden dragon, Wu Kuei. No wonder you're so arrogant. Lord Elder, I uphold the school's rules and you say I'm arrogant. Then Yinwen violated the school's rules and publicly killed someone. What do you call that? Tian's face was cold as he reprimanded in a deep voice. Elder Ming's expression darkened, and he was speechless for a moment. He did not think that Tian would be so eloquent. Since you're the hidden dragon Wu Kuei, let's end this matter here. Elder Ming was silent for a moment. He let out a long breath and said, Yinwen was seriously injured by you. It can be said that she has learned her lesson. Later, I will punish him with 3 days of confinement as a warning. If an ordinary person had beaten Yinwen to such a miserable state, Akira Ranaki naturally wouldn't have let go. He was a member of the Ming family, and Yinwen was a dog raised by the Ming family. Hitting Yinwen was hitting the Ming family in the face. How could he let it go so easily? However, Tian's identity was different. He was a hidden dragon with a clear conscience. He was not the kind of person who could be killed easily. Akira Rinshio reckoned that it was extremely likely that there were experts from the Bloodwing Academy hiding at Tian's side. Bloodwing Academy would arrange corresponding protection for some peak genius martial artists, especially geniuses at Wu Kuei's level. Moreover, he had heard that Tian had defeated Zhu Shi, who was known as the person who tamed the heavens. He was even known as the greatest genius of the Saints' world in the past 1,000,000 years. When such a person came to Bloodwing Academy, it was only natural that he would be strictly protected. After considering it all, Akira Rinshio decided to turn a big problem into a small one. In any case, he would have plenty of chances to take care of Tian in the future. The game had just begun. There was no need to rush. Tian's face was gloomy. His eyes were scarlet like burning flames, but he stared at Akira Rinshio with incomparable coldness, not saying anything. What? Are you not satisfied with how this elder handled things? Akira Rinshio frowned. Cold, he said, Do you want to take a yard after being given an inch? In Bloodwing Academy, he did not just represent himself, but the entire Ming family. In all these years, when had the Ming family ever feared anyone? What he did today was already the greatest tolerance he could muster. If Tian was still not satisfied, then he was really forcing him to get angry. Take a yard after being given an inch? Tianling laughed. Yinwen killed someone, and your punishment is only 3 days of confinement. Is this considered fulfilling the duties of a disciplinary elder? If I killed Ming Yufeng, I can also be confined for 3 days. Are you willing? Brat, don't go too far. Akira Rinshio's expression suddenly changed. He growled, Today, this elder has already tolerated you a lot. If you're still not satisfied, then this elder can only ask you to leave. Tolerated? Tian laughed coldly again and said, Elder Ming, do you think that you're tolerating me by not killing me? What do you think? Akira Rinchio's expression was sinister. If the person standing in front of him was not the hidden dragon Wu Kuei, he would have long since slapped him to death. In Elder Ming's eyes, only the people of your Ming family are people. Everyone else is an ant, right? Nye Tian rebuked, his eyes surging with rage. Brat, don't try to challenge this elder's bottom line again. Akira Rinchio's eyes trembled. He was clearly very angry, but he was deliberately suppressing it. He had been a disciplinary elder for so many years, but he had never felt so sullen as he did today. And the one who made him so sullen was actually a new disciple who had just entered the academy. This undoubtedly made his rage even greater. But no matter how angry he was, he still tolerated it. If he really killed Nye Tian, then it would definitely cause turmoil in the entire Bloodwing Academy. It might even incite a bloody war between the Dean's faction and the aristocratic families. Nye Tian was the hidden dragon Wu Kuei, who had slaughtered his way out of the hidden dragon struggle jointly organized by the 5 great academies. His position was very important. Elder Ming, I feel that it is better for you to not be an elder. Nye Tian stared at Akira Rinchio, enunciating each word like a sharp blade. What did you say? Akira Rinchio's pupil shrank. He felt a lump of anger pressing down on his heart. He could neither swallow nor spit it out. It was extremely uncomfortable. I said that you're not fit to be a disciplinary elder. Nye Tian was not afraid in the slightest. He said in a deep voice, You standing here is an insult to the law enforcement hall. Little brat, you are seeking death. In an instant, Akira Rinchio could no longer restrain himself. With a roar, his entire body's aura erupted. A vigorous and frightening aura appeared, surging towards Nye Tian like a mountain, shaking the entire law enforcement hall. Boom! All of a sudden, a rumbling sound rang out in midair, and Nye Tian felt a deadly pressure bearing down on him. His body sank slightly, and his feet sank 3 inches into the ground. He felt as if his entire body was being torn apart and was in incomparable pain. Die for me! Akira Rinchio was thoroughly enraged. Seeing that Nye Tian was still standing, he roared and directly slapped down with his palm. The shocking scene caused Su Yu's eyes to flicker as she exclaimed, Nye Tian. Akira Rinchio was a Sky Martial Saint ancestor powerhouse. If this palm landed, Nye Tian would undoubtedly die. Akira Rinchio was simply crazy. He even dared to kill the hidden dragon Wu Kuei. At this moment of life and death, a strange change occurred. Boom! Outside the law enforcement hall, a vigorous energy whistled out, blocking Akira Rinchio's fatal palm. In the next instant, a figure descended from the sky like a mountain, blocking in front of Nye Tian. Chapter 42:22. When Nye Tian saw Hua Dongtai appear, the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. He slowly lifted his feet, and his expression became a lot more playful. Hua Dongtai was originally the city lord of Vast Cloud Sacred City, but he lost a bet with him. Now, he was a subordinate, obeying only his orders. After Vast Cloud Sacred City was destroyed, Hua Dongtai came to the everlasting sacred world in advance. Unexpectedly, he appeared in Bloodwing Academy. Elder Hua, what is the meaning of this? Min Rinchio's figure landed, his eyes filled with killing intent as he roared. Nye Tian, are you all right? Hua Dongtai didn't pay any attention to him. Instead, he turned to look at Nye Tian and asked nervously, I'm fine. Nye Tian nodded slightly, but he felt a little uneasy in his heart. He felt that there was a strange power surging in his body, like a wild beast trapped in his body, wanting to rush out. His body originally had many different attributes of power, and some even mutually restrained each other, clashing with each other. If not for the existence of the power of stars, he would have long been killed by the impact of these powers. Nye Tian had just reconstructed his martial body not long ago, and the power in his body had not completely stabilized. Just now, he suffered an extremely strong pressure. If the power in his body became chaotic, it would be terrible. Hua Dongtai, this elder is talking to you. Seeing that Hua Dongtai ignored him, Min Rinchio couldn't help but become even more furious, roaring crazily. Elder Ming, as an enforcement elder, you actually tried to kill a new disciple in the law enforcement hall. Shouldn't this stop you? Huadantai looked at Min Rinchio with a trace of coldness in his eyes. That kind of pressure forcibly weakened Min Rinchio's aura by 30%. It turned out that after Huadantai left Vast Cloud Sacred City, he knew that Nie Tian was coming to Bloodwing Academy. So he came in advance, joined Bloodwing Academy, and coincidentally became an elder of the law enforcement department. A few days ago, he had learned that Nie Tian had come to the Bloodwing. However, he had some matters to attend to, so he had not come to look for Nie Tian. Today, he had originally come to the disciplinary hall to discuss some matters with Akira Rinchio, but he hadn't expected to encounter such a scene. Huadantai, Akira Rinchio's face darkened, but he didn't know what to say. He could never have imagined that Huadantai, who had called him a brother just yesterday, would turn against him for the sake of Nie Tian. Elder Ming, Nie Tian is the hidden dragon martial Koei. For him to come to Bloodwing Academy is the Academy's honor. The corners of Huadongtai's mouth twitched, and he said in a deep voice, "Do you know that during the Hidden Dragon competition, the deans of the 5 great academies all sent invitations to Nie Tian at the same time? This was unprecedented in the history of the 5 academies. There is no unique one. If Nie Tian came to Bloodwing Academy, but was killed by the Academy's disciplinary elder, how do you think the other 4 academies would view Bloodwing? I am stopping you now, not only for your own good, but also for the entire Bloodwing's face." Finished speaking, Huadongtai's eyes shone with a playful light, his entire person becoming very gloomy. Akira Rinchio's expression changed. Just as he was about to speak, he vomited a mouthful of blood. He wasn't a person with much bearing to begin with. Just now, Nie Tian had angered him to the point of losing control, and now, Huadongtai's mocking and ridicule, he was so enraged that he directly vomited blood. Huadongtai sneered, no longer paying attention to Akira Rinchio. He turned to Nie Tian and asked, "Nie Tian, what exactly is going on?" Nie Tian forcefully suppressed the strange feeling in his body and told Huadongtai about Yin Yenwen. After listening, Huadongtai couldn't help but ponder. After a long time, he said, "How do you think we should deal with Yin Yenwen?" "Kill him." Nie Tianling spat out a single word. "Without killing him, we cannot pacify the hearts of the people. Not only must Yin Yenwen be killed, but we must also inform the entire Academy of this matter. Let everyone know the consequences of violating the Academy's rules." Huadongtai's expression suddenly darkened, his expression clearly becoming nervous. He looked at Nie Tian, clearly looking for room for discussion. He could agree to killing Yin Yenwen, but to inform the entire Academy of this matter was completely different. Although he hadn't been at the Academy for long, he knew what kind of person Yin Yenwen was. The Bloodwing 9th Young Master and the various aristocratic families behind him were deeply rooted existences in Bloodwing. Killing Yin Yenwen was actually nothing. Even if the Bloodwing 9th Young Master had some complaints, he wouldn't be too ostentatious in his vengeance. But if he informed the Academy, then the nature of the matter would be different. Everyone knew that Yin Yenwen was a rabid dog raised by the Ming family. Killing him was equivalent to slapping the Ming family's face and the aristocratic family's faces. Doing so was equivalent to declaring war on these aristocratic families. Huadongtai felt that Nie Tian might be a little impulsive because he had just arrived at Bloodwing and didn't know much about these aristocratic families. But at this moment, Nie Tian's expression was solemn and unquestionable, which put him in a difficult position. Of course, Nie Tian knew what he was doing. What he wanted was to make a show of force and warn these aristocratic families. Since Shengguang Mushua wanted to use him to suppress the aristocratic families, then he might as well be more direct. If things really got out of hand, Shengguang Mushua would definitely step in. Moreover, he believed that there were certainly smart people among these aristocratic families who could see that Shengguang Mushua was behind him. The Academy and the aristocratic families had always maintained a dangerous balance. Shengguang Mushua wanted to borrow Nie Tian's hand to break this balance. but he definitely didn't expect that Nietian would act so quickly. Man, after thinking for a long time, Huadongtai suddenly roared in a low voice. Present, the law enforcement disciples were stunned at first, then immediately reacted and responded in unison. Yin Yinwen has violated the Academy's laws, killed the innocent, and is insolent. In order to uphold the Academy's laws, this elder announces that he will be executed on the spot to serve as a warning to others. Huadongtai's expression was solemn as he spoke. The disciples were shocked, and they all froze in place. Didn't you hear this elder's words? Huadongtai's gaze sharpened, and a violent force was released. The disciples seemed to wake up from a dream, but they still didn't dare to attack Yin Yinwen. They could only look at Min Rinchio. Min Rinchio's expression was solemn, and he didn't speak. He didn't believe that anyone in the law enforcement department would dare to kill someone from the Ming clan. Nietian, are you willing to join the Academy's law enforcement department? Huadongtai glanced at Min Rinchio, then looked at Nietian and asked. The corner of Nietian's lips twitched, and he nodded. Then, he took a step forward and lifted Yin Yinwen up. Without hesitation, he killed her. You. Min Rinchio watched this scene, and his eyes trembled. He clenched his teeth, but he couldn't speak. He didn't think that Huadongtai would allow Nietian to join the law enforcement department. Elder Ming, I know that Yin Yinwen is a member of the Ming clan, but the law is not private. Please forgive me. Nietian's lips curled into a cold smile, and he spoke in a low voice. Ugh! Min Rinchio's body shook, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Nietian was far too cruel. He killed a member of the Ming clan, and now he wants to destroy the Ming clan's heart. Huadongtai looked at Nietian, and his expression changed again and again. Only now did he deeply understand how terrifying this young warrior before him was. He suddenly felt that losing to Nietian wasn't an injustice at all. Chapter 42:23. The sudden change made Nietian's body turn sluggish, and his expression became one of extreme pain. In an instant, he felt an extremely violent energy rushing through his body, as if countless sharp blades had exploded, tearing his flesh and meridians apart. Nietian. Huadongtai sensed that something was wrong with Nietian, and his expression changed. Aye. Nietian endured the pain and wanted to say something, but he felt a burning pain in his throat, making it impossible for him to say anything. He stumbled out of the disciplinary hall, and the terrifying energy in his body became more and more violent, like a flame. His body began to emit a dark aura, and the blood-red lines on his face quickly spread, covering his entire body. Huadongtai was shocked by the strange scene in front of him. He felt an extremely terrifying aura from Nietian's body, and it made him, a Sky Martial Saint ancestor, feel a deep sense of danger. What a terrifying aura! Min Rinchio also rushed out, and his expression changed, and he couldn't help but scream. At this moment, he felt that Nietian was like a volcano that was about to erupt, and that kind of violent energy was extremely terrifying. Nietian's expression was incomparably painful, and his facial features were twisted, making him look like a demon. His body was shrouded in a layer of dark aura, making him look like he had just walked out of hell. And in his body, the violent energy kept attacking, as if thousands of ants were biting his body. His bones and meridians were in a state where they were on the verge of breaking, and he was in extreme pain. His consciousness was very clear, and he was doing his best to circulate the star energy to maintain his body's balance. But the more he tried, the more intense the impact in his body became. As the pain intensified, Nietian couldn't bear it anymore, and he raised his head to the sky and screamed. Seeing this scene, Huadongtai couldn't help but panic, but he didn't know what was happening to Nietian's body, so he didn't dare to casually approach, and he didn't dare to interfere. He could tell that Nietian was at a critical moment. If he wasn't careful, he would perish. Akihito's face was gloomy. He couldn't wait for Nietian to die. In any case, Huadongtai was watching from the side. If he didn't do it himself, he couldn't blame Nietian's death on him. At this time, the dark aura on Nietion's body became thicker and thicker. It was like a black fog enveloping his entire body, as if it wanted to devour him. However, at this moment, Nietion felt the impact in his body weaken. What replaced it was a tearing sensation. To be more precise, it was a kind of extraction, a feeling that the power within his bloodline was slowly being extracted. He forced himself to calm down and sensed the surging power in his body, trying to find out where the pulling force came from. Star Origin Stone. After a short moment, his expression changed to shock. He found that the source of his bloodline power was the Star Origin Stone. Could it be that the Star Origin Stone was sucking the power out of his body? Could there be a life hidden within the Star Origin Stone? In an instant, Nietion had a daring guess. His entire body was drenched in cold sweat. Indeed, he felt as if his life force was being stripped away. And when he first obtained the Star Origin Stone, he had felt a strong life force from it. Later, when the power of the stars awakened, the galaxy domain appeared, and the aura of life spread throughout the entire star domain. Could it be that there was a life in the Star Origin Stone that was now absorbing Nietion's bloodline power? Although Nietion had the Star Origin Stone, and the stone had transformed into his 10th Yuan meridian, he still couldn't fully understand the Star Origin Stone and the power of the stars. He even felt that the higher the level of martial arts he came into contact with, the more mysterious the Star Origin Stone became. After a short while, Nietion became cold. He felt the pulling force in his body weaken, and at the same time, the blood-red lines on his body slowly faded. After a while, his entire body returned to normal. The blood-red lines completely disappeared, and so did the dark aura. It was as if nothing had happened. Nietion stood on the spot, his expression puzzled. He couldn't speak for a long time. Nietion, are you all right? Huadantai looked at Nietion for a long time before he stepped forward and asked. I'm fine. Nietion shook his head slightly, but the shock on his face was still there. He took a deep breath and sensed his martial body. His face once again became blank. He was shocked to find that his martial body had undergone a shocking change. Many of the powers that originally existed in his body had disappeared. The heavenly Tao shackles, the heart of the sky evolution Saint Spirit, the omniscient Saint Spirit, and even the Tian Ho bloodline, the dragon-herding energy, the sage seal of prophecy, the light of eternity, and other powers had all disappeared. How is this possible? Nietion stood rooted to the ground for a long time before he finally exclaimed in shock. His eyes were still trembling. These powers had originally been absorbed by him and gradually became part of his bloodline power. Now that they had disappeared, how could he not be shocked? Could it be the power of the stars? In the next moment, Nietion reacted and his divine sense entered the Star Origin Stone. Just now, he clearly sensed that the Star Origin Stone was madly absorbing the power of his bloodline. Could it be that these powers that had disappeared had all been absorbed by the Star Origin Stone? The Star Origin Stone. Within the boundary of the Star River, the boundary formation was in operation. The Nine Heavens River was dazzling, and the entire world was filled with a strong life force. However, the strange thing was that Nietion didn't sense any familiar aura. What is going on? He was a little confused. Could the powers in his body have disappeared into thin air? Nietion, the powers in your body must have been absorbed by the power of the stars. At this moment, the fat cat's voice finally sounded. Absorb! Nietion's eyes trembled in shock. The power of the stars could absorb other powers. This was too terrifying. It should be so. The fat cat nodded and said, carefully sense your martial body. There should be a brand new bloodline power formed. Nietion frowned and took a deep breath to calm himself down as much as possible. He then began to sense his martial body. His divine sense delved deeper into the bloodline. After a moment, he let out a long breath of turbid air. His whole person was stunned again. Just as the fat cat said, a brand new bloodline had been born in his body. It had integrated deeply with his martial body. If he carefully sensed it, he could see spots of light in the depths of his bloodline, like twinkling stars. Fat, You mean that the power of the stars devoured the other powers in my body and created a brand new bloodline power, right? After half a day, Nietian became cold and asked in a deep voice. Yes. The fat cat nodded and said, the powers in your body are too complicated, so it is much more difficult for you to reach the heavenly tribulation realm than ordinary people. The power of the stars devouring and integrating these powers should be a good thing for you. Chapter 42:24. Thinking of the fiend god nascent embryo, Nietian's expression changed. It would be terrible if the fiend god nascent embryo was also devoured by the astral energy. Nietian's eyes trembled. With a thought, the fiend god energy in his body surged, and the fiend god inverse rune appeared at the corner of his eyes. His heart relaxed, and his entire body relaxed. The fiend god nascent embryo was still there, and it wasn't devoured by the astral energy. Strange, why is the fiend god nascent embryo still intact when the other energies were devoured by the astral energy? He calmed down, and a puzzled look appeared on his face. Maybe the fiend god nascent embryo is too strong, or maybe it's because of your innate bloodline that the astral energy can't devour. Fat Cat laughed and guessed. Indeed, the other energies, such as the heavenly Tao shackles and the heart of the sky, were obtained by chance by Nietian during his training. Only the fiend god nascent embryo was his own. It's good that the fiend god nascent embryo is still here. Nietian didn't think too much, but he had a faint worry in his heart. He wasn't sure if there was really a life hidden in the astral essence stone. Nietian. Huadantai saw Nietian standing there in a daze for a long time and called out again. I'm fine. Nietian smiled faintly and then noticed the astonished faces of Su Yu and the rest and said, Elder Hua, these three knew that Yin Yinwen killed someone, but they didn't report it. They should be punished. The three were originally stunned, but when they heard Nietian's words, they were shocked, and their expressions changed. How do you think we should punish them? Huadantai was also stunned. He didn't expect Nietian to say this. Expel them from the academy. Nietian stared at the three and said in a deep voice. Huadantai frowned, and his face sank. These three were indeed in the wrong, but they shouldn't be expelled from the academy. Lord Elder, we know our wrongs. Lord Elder, please forgive us this time. The three of them immediately knelt down and begged. The three of them were not super geniuses. It was not easy for them to enter the Bloodwing Academy. If they were expelled, their martial path would be completely different. Huadantai had a troubled expression as he looked at Nietian. However, the latter was extremely resolute and said, Listen up, leave the academy immediately, go as far as you can, and never come back. The three of them glanced at one another. They didn't expect Nietian to be so ruthless. Huadantai frowned, but immediately understood Nietian's meaning. His face darkened as he waved his hand and said, You can leave. The three of them had looks of despair on their faces. After a long time, they stood up and slowly left. Nietian nodded slightly and left as well. His martial body had undergone a huge change, so he needed to immediately return and thoroughly examine it. On the way, Su Yu's expression softened a little. She said in a low voice, Nietian, thank you this time. She knew that if it weren't for Nietian, she definitely wouldn't have been able to avenge her little brother. Moreover, Nietian had almost lost his life because of this matter. It's nothing. Nietian smiled faintly, extremely indifferent. Su Yu was silent for a while, then suddenly asked, Nietan, although those three are somewhat repulsive, they were only doing it to protect themselves. Isn't expelling them from the academy a bit too much as a punishment? I was saving them. Nietan laughed and asked in reply, Do you think that if they continued to stay in the academy, the Ming family would let them live? Su Yu's expression changed. She immediately understood. The Ming family was vengeful. Although Yin Yinwen didn't die because of those three, they couldn't kill Nietian. They would definitely target those three. No wonder Nietian had warned the three of them to leave the institute and never come back. Thinking of this, Su Yu's eyes trembled. She said in panic, Then wouldn't I be in danger too? Yes. Nietian nodded and said, The Ming family will definitely take revenge on you. However, they should be more restrained in the near future. You should be fine if you stay in the academy. Yes. Suyu nodded and said no more. Tian was a bit worried. He planned to send Suyu back to her residence first before returning to his Liuyu court. Tian. However, at this moment, a familiar voice rang out, causing Tian's eyes to heat up. Then, a figure landed. It was a familiar face. Zhu Shi. Why are you here at Bloodwing Academy? Tian couldn't help but be surprised to see Zhu Shi. The latter was a warrior of the Dragon Clan. Shouldn't he be at Dragon Academy? If he can come to Bloodwing Academy, why can't I? Zhu Shi smiled faintly and said, although I lost to you in the Hidden Dragon competition, I'm not sure what will happen next. You came to Bloodwing Academy to win against me? Tian's lips twitched as he asked with a smile. I'll get up from where I fell. I, Zhu Shi, am not weaker than anyone. Zhu Shi's eyes were sharp and full of heroism. He came to Bloodwing Academy for Tian. He had lost to Tian before, so he had to win it back. Why, you're Zhu Shi? At this moment, Suyu, who had been watching from the side for a long time, finally reacted. She stared at Zhu Shi with trembling eyes and asked with a trembling voice. Zhu Shi nodded and looked at Suyu. He felt that the timid girl before him was quite cute. He smiled and said, are you Tian's friend? I am. Suyu was stunned for a few seconds before nodding. Actually, when Zhu Shi had just arrived, she had vaguely recognized him. She just didn't dare to confirm it. In her heart, Zhu Shi was a high and mighty existence. She couldn't accept that he had suddenly appeared in front of her. Brother Zhu, this is senior sister Suyu. She's very obsessed with you. Tian saw this scene and smiled faintly as he joked. Is that so? Zhu Shi was stunned for a moment. He seemed to be a bit embarrassed and forced a smile. Suyu's face turned even redder. She lowered her head and didn't dare to look at Zhu Shi again. Tian, do you dare to fight me again? Zhu Shi no longer looked at Suyu and asked directly. Sure. Tian smiled faintly and said, how about in 3 days? It's a promise. Zhu Shi's eyes were burning as he nodded heavily. Brother Zhu, I have a request. Tian's gaze swept over Suyu and suddenly said, you and I are friends. There's no harm in saying it. Zhu Shi was very straightforward and nodded. Senior sister, Suyu has had some friction with some people recently. Those people are waiting for an opportunity to take revenge on her. I want to ask you to help protect her. Tian said with a smile. This? Zhu Shi's face stiffened. He was stunned and couldn't say a word. Growing up, he rarely had the opportunity to interact with girls, let alone interact with them alone. Tian's request made him feel a bit awkward. Suyu was even more stunned. She didn't expect Tian to say such a thing. However, she didn't dare to speak. She was afraid that Zhu Shi would refuse. Chapter 42-25 Bloodwing Academy, Painting Grounds, Flowing Rain Court. In a small courtyard, Tian sat cross-legged, a vigorous force circulating within his body, condensing into a faint barrier around his body, releasing a completely different bloodline aura. After a while, he stood up, frowning, a puzzled look on his face. Ever since the various energies in his body had been devoured by the power of the stars, he had quickly broken through to the heavenly tribulation realm. Now, he was already a first-level heavenly tribulation warrior. However, after breaking through, he did not feel his strength increase. On the contrary, it had decreased. What made him even more depressed was that the new bloodline power in his body was very mysterious. It was very difficult to activate, requiring a high degree of concentration in order to use it. Your strength weakening is due to the integration of energies. Many energies have been devoured and fused. The new bloodline formed is not mature, so it is somewhat weak. But in the long run, this is very beneficial to you because the potential of your martial body has greatly increased. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded. MHM. Tian nodded slightly. He had a deep understanding of what Fat Cat had said. Previously, because there was too much energy in his body, too complicated, every time he used a certain power, he would feel a strong sense of oppression. But now, When he used the new bloodline, he did not feel any oppression. On the contrary, the feeling of power erupting made him feel incomparably comfortable. This new bloodline was devoured by the stars. Why don't we call it the star bloodline? Tian felt the flow of the bloodline power, smiling faintly. Fat Cat did not reply. He did not care about the name of the bloodline. 3 days, the arranged battle with Zhu Shi is over. Tian muttered to himself, smiling as he walked out of Flowing Rain Court, heading towards Su Yu's place. Soon, he arrived at Su Yu's Red Leaf Pavilion. As expected, Zhu Shi was also there. Tian, I have been waiting for you for a long time. Seeing Tian's arrival, Zhu Shi's eyes blazed, and he said in high spirits, "It seems that you really want to win." Tian laughed, a calm expression on his face. His desire to win was as strong as Zhu Shi's, but he didn't take this challenge too seriously. It would be great if he won, but it didn't matter if he lost. He knew that in a true battle between martial artists, it was always a battle to the death, but this was not the case. It was just a friendly match. Tian, you've already broken through to the heavenly tribulation realm, so I'm not taking advantage of you. Zhu Shi nodded slightly. He couldn't help but have a strange expression when he sensed Tian's aura. He felt that Tian's aura was a little different from when he was in the Hidden Dragon struggle and the Ancestral Dragon's abyss. It was very strange. Moreover, Tian's cultivation had clearly increased, but his aura was not as majestic as before. Let's go and find a place. Tian smiled faintly. He was also looking forward to the next battle. His bloodline had just stabilized, and he had broken through to the heavenly tribulation realm. He needed an opponent to test it out, and Zhu Shi was undoubtedly very suitable. Are you guys really going to fight? Su Yu looked at the two of them and asked with a troubled expression. Of course. Zhu Shi smiled faintly and said, I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Can't we not fight? Su Yu frowned and said, both of you are very strong. It won't be good if you injure each other during the fight. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Zhu Shi said confidently, we aren't that weak. Don't worry, it's just a friendly match, not a life-and-death duel, said Tian with a smile. He knew that Su Yu was worried about Zhu Shi. Indeed, Su Yu was very worried about Zhu Shi. On one hand, she had special feelings for Zhu Shi. On the other hand, she knew very well how terrifying Tian was. She had personally seen Tian endure Min Rinchio's oppression head-on. Although Zhu Shi had the reputation of being able to subdue the heavens, he had, after all, lost to Tian. Moreover, Su Yu felt that Zhu Shi shouldn't be a match for Tian. Su Yu's gaze swept over Zhu Shi and Tian. Suddenly, she thought of something and said in pleasant surprise, why don't you guys change the method of sparring? Change the method? Tian and Zhu Shi were both surprised, curious. Su Yu's eyes brightened as she asked, do you guys know about the Academy's bounty missions? No. Zhu Shi and Tian shook their heads. Then I'll bring you guys to take a look. Su Yu laughed, then ran out excitedly. Tian and Zhu Shi were puzzled, but they still followed. Soon, they arrived at the Academy's mission board. Periodically, Bloodwing Academy would issue missions. After completing the missions, one could obtain the corresponding points. When one accumulated 100 points, one could freely choose whether or not to leave the Academy. Among them, one of the Academy's missions was a bounty mission. The so-called bounty mission was to capture or kill a few people for the Academy. The majority of these people were people who had committed crimes in the Academy and then fled the Academy. However, the matter of capturing them was very troublesome. Spending a lot of effort would not bring them much benefit. If the same amount of time was spent on training, it would be better. Thus, as time passed, the Academy's bounty missions increased to the point where it was almost a disaster. Tian's group of 3 arrived before a bulletin board. They saw a dense mass of names. Behind the names were the corresponding introductions and points, as well as a token. Look, these are all people who have committed crimes in the Academy. You guys can choose the bounty mission and see who completes it first, Su Yu said excitedly as she looked at the bulletin board. Tian's gaze swept across, and he could not help but frown. He said, there are several tens of thousands of people on there. There are even some people from several tens of thousands of years ago. Could it be that the Academy allows them to stir up trouble outside and not care about it? Among the people on the bulletin board, there were those who killed, those who raped, those who stole, and there were even those who tortured others to cultivate taboo martial techniques. From Nietion's point of view, these people should all be killed. After these people escaped from the Academy, they would definitely not be good people. Suyu sighed and said, "The Academy has no other choice. There are too many people to capture. The majority of people do not like bounty missions. They are dangerous and troublesome. Most importantly, they will take a long time. Everyone is busy training. How would they have the time to capture people?" Nietion's eyebrows furrowed in agreement. In the world of martial cultivation, the strong were revered. The stronger a cultivator was, the more indifferent they would be to certain things. They would pay more attention to their own martial path and would not be disturbed by the matters of the outside world. Although these people had committed crimes, as long as they did not threaten the Academy, what did it have to do with them? Brother Zhu, why don't we each choose a bounty mission? Whoever completes it first will be the winner. What do you think? Nietion looked at Zhu Shi and asked in a provocative tone. Zhu Shi's expression was a bit awkward as he said, "These people left the Academy a long time ago. Who knows where they went? If we were to go and capture them, just finding them would take a long time." It was obvious that he did not want to waste too much time on this. From his point of view, he and Nietion were both young cultivators. It was a great opportunity for them to cultivate. It was not worth it to waste time on capturing people. "Leave the search to me. You only need to be responsible for capturing people," Nietion said mysteriously with a faint smile. "Are you sure you can find them?" Zhu Shi frowned and looked at Nietion suspiciously. "Don't worry." Nietion nodded and smiled. He was extremely confident. Chapter 42:26. Then you can choose your missions now. Suyu was very excited when she saw that Nietion and Zhu Shi were really going to bet on their missions. "You just arrived. Although your talent is very high, your strength isn't that great. So, you should choose from the low-ranked missions." The Bloodwing Academy's missions were divided into 9 ranks according to their difficulty. The higher the rank of the mission, the higher the corresponding academic points. Generally speaking, the third-ranked missions only gave 1 or 2 points. However, the person they wanted to capture had left the Academy a long time ago, so the difficulty was very high. "I'll take this one." Nietion stared at the bulletin board for a long time, and then took off a mission medallion. Every mission had a mission token. The token contained information about the target and could help the person carrying out the mission. When Suyu saw the token in Nietion's hand, she couldn't help but tremble and nervously say, "Nietion, you chose a 4th-ranked mission. This means that the person you want to capture has most likely reached the heavenly awareness Saint Emperor realm." The reward for 4th-ranked missions was 3 to 4 points, but the difficulty was very high. Normally, the target was very strong and had left the Academy for a long time. Suyu originally thought that Nietion would at most choose a 3rd-ranked mission. She hadn't expected him to choose a 4th-ranked mission. It had to be known that only the peak disciples of the Heavenly Tribulation Division or the Heavenly Awareness Division would dare accept 4th-ranked missions. Nietion had just arrived at the Academy and had just broken through to the first level of Heavenly Tribulation. Yet, he chose a 4th-ranked mission. It was too risky. Nietion had an indifferent expression. He probed the mission token with his divine sense and immediately received a lot of information. The person he wanted to capture was called White Demon. 30 years ago, because he cultivated an evil martial art, he had killed many people and escaped before the Academy found out. The martial art White Demon cultivated was called the Nine Wolf Extreme art. It required a very special item to successfully cultivate. It was precisely to obtain that item that he had crazily killed people. Extreme blood was exactly what the Nine Wolf Extreme art required. As the name implied, it was the blood of Extreme. In reality, it was the virgin blood of a girl. Moreover, White Demon had a sinister personality. In a battle, he had sucked the blood of his opponent giving him the nickname of Bloodthirsty Wolf Demon. It's him. Nie Tian understood White Demon. He gripped the token in his hands, his expression firm. Zhu Shi frowned and looked for a long time before choosing a fourth-tier mission. Since Nie Tian had chosen the fourth-tier mission, of course, he could not show weakness. Wait a moment. However, at this moment, Su Yu stopped Zhu Shi. Then, she looked at Nie Tian and said, I think the two of you should carry out a mission together. It's too dangerous to carry out a fourth-tier mission alone, and it'll take too long. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and glanced at Zhu Shi. The latter didn't say anything. Clearly, he didn't want to carry out the mission alone. To be honest, if it weren't for the circumstances, Zhu Shi wouldn't have chosen a fourth-tier mission. Although he was arrogant, he still had a clear understanding of his own strength. If his opponent was a heavenly enlightenment saint emperor, it would indeed be very difficult for him. That's fine. Nie Tian thought for a moment and nodded. This was their first time carrying out a mission. If they had companions, they could look after each other. Nie Tian showed Zhu Shi the mission token. The latter also agreed to carry out the mission. Nie Tian, how do we find White Demon? Zhu Shi returned the mission token to Nie Tian and asked with a frown. He wasn't worried about capturing someone. Instead, he was worried about how to find White Demon. White Demon had already left Bloodwing Academy for several decades. It was extremely difficult to find someone in the vast holy world. Is there a branch of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion here? Nie Tian asked Su Yu with a faint smile. Of course. Su Yu nodded. Then, her eyes lit up and she said, You can't be thinking of asking the Myriad Yuan Pavilion for help, right? Can I? Nie Tian laughed, his face full of confidence. Su Yu frowned and said, The Myriad Yuan Pavilion is filled with formation masters and barrier masters. Moreover, their influence covers the entire holy world. It shouldn't be too difficult to ask them to find someone. However, they all have strange tempers. All of them are like lords. I'm afraid it won't be easy to ask them for help. Easy. That's right. Zhu Shi also frowned and said, I heard that the Myriad Yuan Pavilion has a grand formation that can reflect the holy world. As long as the aura of a cultivator's soul is placed in the grand formation, they can be found. However, this grand formation is a treasure of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Ordinary people can't use it. Let's go to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion's branch in Bloodwing City and take a look. What if they're willing to help? Nie Tian said with a faint smile as he swept his gaze over the two. Zhu Shi and Su Yu were speechless. Was this something that could be tested by luck? However, they had no better ideas. They could only do this for now. Nie Tian put away the mission token. The three left Bloodwing Academy and headed for the Myriad Yuan Pavilion's Bloodwing branch. Soon, they arrived at the Bloodwing branch. This is it. Su Yu looked at the magnificent building in front of her and couldn't help but curl her lips. She said, I wonder if they'll let us in. With a faint smile on his face, Nie Tian strode forward. In fact, he didn't have much confidence in his heart. Because he had given the Myriad Yuan sacred token that Qing Qi had given him to Jun Jinxing, he didn't have any proof. He didn't know if the people of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion would pay attention to him. I hope Senior Qing Qi is here, Nie Tian said inwardly when he arrived at the hall. Because Vast Cloud Sacred City was destroyed and the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was gone. Qing Qi had already come to Bloodwing City in advance. However, it was unknown if he was in the Bloodwing branch. Distinguished guests, is there anything I can help you with? At this time, a young girl walked over and greeted Nie Tian and the others very politely. Nie Tian looked at the rather alluring girl in front of him and smiled faintly. He said, May I ask if Grandmaster Qing Qi is here? The girl was stunned for a moment. She had never seen a guest who directly asked the pavilion master. The most important thing was that Nie Tian and the others were too young and wore ordinary clothes. They didn't look like important people. I'm sorry, Grandmaster Qing Qi is not here. The girl didn't show too much disgust and just responded with a faint smile. Then what about Grandmaster Guan Shao? Nie Tian asked with a smile again. In the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, apart from Qing Qi, the only person he knew was Guan Shao. Guan Shao was Qing Qi's personal disciple. When Yetian was in Vast Cloud Sacred City, he had some conflicts with Guan Zhao's father, Guan Quan, but they were resolved later. Grandmaster Guan Xiao is not here either. The girl's expression was somewhat cold. She thought that Yetian and the others were here to make trouble. She said, "If there's nothing else, please leave." Yetian frowned and felt a little embarrassed. In fact, this girl couldn't be blamed. With their status, it was indeed impossible for them to meet masters like Qing Qi and Guan Xiao. "Yo, isn't this hidden dragon Wu Kuei Yetian?" At this time, a voice with a strong sense of mockery rang out. Then, a young martial artist holding a folding fan slowly walked over. It was none other than Qian Sun, one of the 9 young masters of Bloodwings. Yetian had met Qian Sun before, so he was naturally familiar with him. Chapter 42-27. Ming Yufeng. Hearing this name, Yetian's expression changed slightly. He looked at the white-clothed man cautiously. Ming Yufeng was indeed very handsome, his facial features no less exquisite than those of peerless beauties. Perhaps it was because he was too delicate, but his eyes were sharp and contained a trace of femininity. While Yetian was observing Ming Yufeng, the latter was also sizing him up. Gan Sun had clearly said something to Ming Yufeng. The latter's expression changed again and again. "Yetian, these two are looking at you strangely. Do you have a grudge with them?" Zhu Shi noticed something was wrong and secretly transmitted to Yetian. Yetian nodded slightly, his expression unchanged. At this moment, Ming Yufeng walked over with a strange smile on his face. He stared at Yetian and said, "You're Yetian?" Yetian nodded indifferently and looked straight at Ming Yufeng, not avoiding his gaze. "You were the one who killed Yin Yanwen, and you were also the one who requested for the announcement, right?" Ming Yufeng's expression didn't change. Yetian nodded once more, his gaze sharp. Ming Yufeng hadn't expected Yetian to be so calm. His expression darkened, and he asked coldly, "Do you know what this means?" "I'm a member of the disciplinary department. I only act according to the rules of the academy. I don't care about anything else," Tianling replied coldly without the slightest fear. He sensed a strange aura from Ming Yufeng. It seemed to be an extremely cold aura. It was very strange. "Very good. This young master will remember you." Ming Yufeng's expression was gloomy, the cold aura in his body becoming even more obvious. Tian frowned, but didn't say anything else. "Is this the legendary Fu Tian?" Ming Yufeng suddenly looked at Zhu Shi and asked with a sneer. Zhu Shi replied indifferently, neither servile nor overbearing. "I didn't expect the Grand Fu Tian to come to Bloodwing Academy." Ming Yufeng's gaze was cold and filled with ridicule. "Does my coming to Bloodwing Academy make you unhappy?" Zhu Shi frowned, not the slightest bit polite. Ever since he was young, he had the halo of the strongest genius. How could he tolerate others mocking and ridiculing him? Not really. The corners of Ming Yufeng's mouth twitched. He glanced at Yetian and said, "However, the person beside you is a mortal enemy of the Bloodwing 9th Young Master. If you choose to stand with him, then you will also be an enemy of the Bloodwing 9th Young Master." Zhu Shi's brows furrowed even tighter as he sneered. "Yetian is my friend. I'm very sure of it. As for his enemies, whether they are young Master Jiao or young Master Jiao, if they want to touch him, they'll have to go through me first." Ming Yufeng's face sank and his expression became ugly. He didn't understand why Zhu Shi would get involved with Yetian. Zhu Shi was known as the Heaven Vanquisher. He was very strong, but he was still very young, so he did not pose much of a threat to the Bloodwing Young Master 9. Most importantly, his identity was extraordinary. He was a super genius from the Dragon Clan, and he had a powerful faction supporting him. To put it bluntly, Zhu Shi was someone he didn't dare touch. At this moment, Qian Sun spoke with a sinister expression. "Zhu Shi, let me give you a word of advice. This is Bloodwing Academy. You best find out who we are. You want to use the faction behind you to pressure me?" Zhu Shi sneered once more. Zhu Shi, don't care about you young masters. If you want to play, I'll definitely accompany you to the end. Let's go." Qian Sun wanted to say something else, but was stopped by Ming Yufeng. The latter spoke coldly, then strode away. Nie Tian's expression sank slightly. The instant Ming Yufeng passed by him, his expression changed. In the blink of an eye, he felt a wave of cold air invade his body. It was like maggots in one's bones, directly seeping into his body. Subconsciously, Nie Tian operated his yuan meridians, trying to force the cold qi out. However, he didn't expect that the cold qi was so terrifying that it directly froze his limbs and meridians, forming a thin layer of ice crystals on the outside of his body. Nie Tian. Zhu Shi immediately sensed that something was wrong and exclaimed. He reached out to support Nie Tian, only to feel the cold air pressing down on him. His expression changed, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Suyu was even more dumbfounded by the scene before her. She stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do. Roar! At this moment, Nie Tian's body shook. A deep dragon roar came from within his body, and the ice around him directly shattered. Slowly, his expression softened and returned to normal. Nie Tian, are you all right? Zhu Shi stabilized himself and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Nie Tian took a deep breath and furrowed his brows. He felt a gust of air accumulating in his body, making him feel somewhat uncomfortable. That cold air just now was simply too terrifying. He had to use his star bloodline to just barely force it out. This was the first time he'd used his star bloodline to resist an external force, and it displayed the power of the star bloodline. Moreover, the star bloodline was fused with various powers and could also erupt with the power of draconic qi. However, he was still a step too slow. It seemed that some of the cold air had already seeped into his blood and meridians, and even his star bloodline couldn't force it out. And yet Tian breathed once more, and he could clearly feel his breathing becoming sluggish. A cold, killing intent surged in his eyes as he looked at Ming Yufeng's back. In that instant just now, it was Ming Yufeng who'd suddenly attacked him. He hadn't expected Ming Yufeng to be so sinister and vicious as to dare make a move in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. This person is incomparably sinister. He's not someone to be trifled with. Zhu Shi, of course, also saw that it was Ming Yufeng who'd made a move. At the same time, Ming Yufeng and Qian Sun had already walked out of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Brother Ming, you really dared to make a move. Qian Sun sensed the surroundings, and after confirming that there was no one around, he chuckled. Oomph. Ming Yufeng sneered and said in a deep voice, he was struck by my 9-wolf extreme curse. He'll definitely die within the 9 heavens. There won't be any problems, right? Qian Sun smiled again, but then he became a bit worried. That kid is a hidden dragon, Wu Kuei. If they find out that we killed him, we'll probably anger the dean. Don't worry. The 9-wolf extreme curse will disappear after the cultivator dies. No one will be able to find out. Ming Yufeng's face was dark as he said cold. Furthermore, even if someone finds out, they won't suspect me. Brother Ming is wise. Qian Sun chuckled, already imagining the scene of Nie Tian's death in his mind. As long as the 9-wolf extreme curse was successful, even a Sky Martial Saint ancestor wouldn't be able to endure it, not to mention that Nie Tian was only in the first level of heavenly tribulation. Chapter 42:28. Feeling the strange changes in his body, Nie Tian's expression couldn't help but change. It seemed that the cold energy released by Ming Yufeng was no small matter. Nie Tian, are you really all right? Zhu Shi saw that Nie Tian's expression wasn't right and asked again. Nie Tian shook his head slightly, and his expression returned to normal. He didn't want Zhu Shi to worry. Although the cold energy left in his body made his breathing stagnate, it shouldn't be fatal. As long as he spent some time, he would definitely be able to completely expel the cold energy. Zhu Shi nodded, but was still a bit worried. Just now, he had also come into contact with some cold energy. That cold energy was extremely evil, and even someone with the Grand Shaman frozen in bloodline like him felt a bone-piercing cold. Was Nie Tian really all right after being ambushed by Ming Yufeng? Nie Tian swept his gaze across the Myriad Yuan Pavilion's hall. Since Qing Qi and Guan Shao weren't here, and he didn't have the myriad yuan sacred token to prove his identity. There was no point in staying here any longer, so he decided to leave. "Excuse me, which one of you is Lord Nietian?" But at this time, a myriad yuan pavilion administrator walked over and asked respectfully. Zhu Shi and Su Yu were stunned at the same time, and then looked towards Nietian. Nietian frowned, looked at the person, and nodded. "I am Nietian. Lord Nietian, this way please." The administrator smiled faintly and bowed, his attitude extremely respectful. Su Yu and Zhu Shi were astonished. Just now, someone was trying to chase them away. Why did an administrator suddenly appear and be so polite? Nietian walked forward. Zhu Shi and Su Yu wanted to follow, but were stopped by the administrator. The latter said with a smile, "Please wait here for a moment." Zhu Shi and Su Yu's expressions were a bit awkward, and they could only stay where they were. Nietian followed the administrator to the inner hall, and the latter said with a smile, "Lord Nietian, this one is Su Qing, Grandmaster Qing Qi's disciple." Nietian looked at Su Qing blankly. He didn't expect the latter to be so young, and was actually Qing Qi's disciple. He asked, "Is Senior Qing Qi here?" "Teacher came not long ago, but he left in a hurry. Before he left, he told me that you would come here and that I should take good care of you." Su Qing nodded with a smile and said, "What's the matter? Tell me." Nietian frowned, not knowing why Qing Qi suddenly left. Nieyuro was still at Qing Qi's place. Did something happen to her? But it was useless to think too much at this time. After hesitating for a moment, he directly handed the mission token to Su Qing and said, "I want to know where this person is." "This is the mission token of Bloodwing Academy, right?" Su Qing took the token, looked at it, and said, "Please wait a moment. I'll be right back." Nietian nodded and watched Su Qing's figure disappear. About half an hour later, Su Qing returned with the token. However, his complexion wasn't relaxed. After returning the token to Nietian, he hesitated for a moment and said, "Sir Nietian, this white demon you want to capture isn't simple at all. I suggest you change to another mission." Nietian had an indifferent expression. He said, "Grandmaster Su Qing, since I have already chosen this mission, I won't change my mind. If you have something to say, just say it." Su Qing frowned and sighed. He said, "I've already found Whiteman's location. Take a look for yourself." Saying so, he handed a locator scroll to Nietian. Nietian took the scroll and opened it, sending his divine sense into it. After a moment, he closed the scroll, his expression changing. He looked at Su Qing and asked, "Grandmaster Su Qing, this map seems to indicate Bloodwing City." Su Qing nodded and said, "White Demon is in Bloodwing City." Nietian's face stiffened slightly as he was convinced of this. He had never imagined that White Demon was in Bloodwing City. A criminal wanted by Bloodwing Academy, who had killed so many people, was actually hiding in Bloodwing City. How could he not be shocked? White Demon had left Bloodwing Academy for more than 30 years. Could it be that he had been hiding in Bloodwing City all this time and had never left? If that was the case, how did he manage to avoid being discovered? Back then, Whiteman's case had caused quite a commotion, attracting the attention of the upper echelons of the Bloodwing. They had searched the entire everlasting sacred world for a long time. Hence, it would not be easy for White Demon to hide under the eyes of Bloodwing Academy. I've also heard a little about White Demon in the past. I just observed from the Divine Soul Spill Array and found that Whiteman's divine soul isn't very large. For the past 30 years, he's been hiding in Bloodwing City. Su Qing looked at Nietian and said, "For White Demon to be able to avoid Bloodwing Academy's search, there is definitely something behind him." The sheet. "Grandmaster Su Qing, are you saying that someone is secretly helping White Demon?" Nietian frowned, surprised. Although Su Qing's words were vague, he could still hear the underlying meaning. "Yes." Su Qing hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "The person behind White Demon should have an extremely high status. It is very likely that he is related to Bloodwing Academy." Hearing Su Qing's words, Nietian's eyes couldn't help but tremble. In truth, he had also faintly guessed some clues, but he didn't dare to confirm it. If the person behind White Demon was someone in the upper echelons of Bloodwing Academy, then things would not be so simple. Su Qing looked at Nietian and said, Lord Nietian, this White Demon is no small matter. There is no need for you to provoke such a person just for an academy mission. Grandmaster Su Qing, since I have encountered this mission, how can I just sit back and do nothing? Nietian had a calm expression. He smiled and said, I really want to see just who is hiding behind White Demon. Su Qing frowned. He knew that Nietian wasn't the kind of person who would easily give up. However, Whiteman's matter was just too dangerous. After thinking for a moment, Su Qing said, Nietian, do you know where White Demon is right now? Where? Nietian couldn't help but frown when he saw that Su Qing's expression wasn't right. He had only roughly glanced at the map and hadn't determined Whiteman's specific location. Su Qing paused, then nodded and said, At Bloodwing Academy. What? Nietian's gaze trembled as he let out a startled cry. He never imagined that White Demon was actually at Bloodwing Academy. Could it be that White Demon had never left Bloodwing Academy? After a moment, Nietian calmed down slightly and asked, Grandmaster Su Qing, are you sure? MHM. Su Qing nodded and said, When new students enter the academy, the 5 great academies will record the soul aura of every student. The mission token you gave me contains Whiteman's soul aura. Just now, I used the Divine Soul Divination Array to search and quickly found White Demon. A martial artist's other aura might change, but their soul aura absolutely cannot. So, I am very sure that White Demon is at Bloodwing Academy. Nietian's expression stiffened as he sank into deep thought. He couldn't understand how a person who was wanted by the academy could quietly hide in the academy. Chapter 42:29. Change his identity? When Nietian heard Su Qing's words, he couldn't help but frown. He hadn't thought of this possibility. Indeed, if White Demon wanted to hide in Bloodwing Academy for a long time, he needed a completely new identity. However, Nietian couldn't understand what kind of identity could allow White Demon to hide for decades without being exposed. Su Qing looked at Nietian and said, Nietian, the fact that White Demon was able to hide for so long means that the person who gave him a new identity has a very high status. Yes, Nietian nodded. He couldn't help but reevaluate the young grandmaster before him. Although Su Qing hadn't had much contact with this matter, he could see it very clearly. In fact, without his reminder, Nietian wouldn't have thought so much about it. Su Qing was so young, but his considerations were extremely comprehensive. It was no wonder Qing Qi had favored him and accepted him as a disciple. Nietian, I must remind you that this matter isn't as simple as carrying out an academy mission or capturing a criminal. If you want to capture White Demon, you will definitely touch the person behind him. If I'm not mistaken, this person is definitely in the upper echelon of Bloodwing Academy. Su Qing's expression turned solemn as he reminded Nietian. Nietian's eyes flickered. Precisely because of this, I have all the more reason to bring White Demon to justice. As for the person behind him, he must be dragged out as well. Bloodwing Academy is the publicly acknowledged holy land of martial arts in the sacred world. We cannot allow such a black sheep to exist. Su Qing frowned. This silver-haired youth before him was even more stubborn than he had imagined. Grandmaster Su Qing, you don't need to worry about me. I know what I'm doing, Nietian said with a faint smile when he saw the worry in Su Qing's eyes. He knew that Shengguang Mushiwe had already sent people to protect him in secret. As long as he was in the academy, he was absolutely safe. Since White Demon was in Bloodwing Academy, things had become much simpler. Su Qing knew that he couldn't dissuade Nietian, so he warned him, Nietian, if you encounter any danger in the academy, you can find a person called Li Yu. Just say that you're my friend. He will protect you. Li Yu? When Nietian heard this name, his expression changed, and he asked in surprise, Brother Su, do you know this person? He's my good friend. Su Qing saw Nietian's strange expression and couldn't help asking, You know him too? I don't know him, but I'm looking for him. Brother Su, can you tell me how to find him? Nietian asked with a faint smile. Li Yu was the first name Nie Tian had heard from Angel Emperor Xinguang Huaiyu. He was the son of Xinguang Yi Tian and Zhu Ru Shuang, and also the demon tamer that Yi Yao had mentioned. Nie Tian had come to Bloodwing Academy to look for Li Yu and tell him his true identity. He had not expected that Su Qing would actually know Li Yu. It seemed like the two of them were very good friends. Su Qing laughed. He, too, had not expected such a coincidence. He said, Li Yu is a teacher in charge of the life and death hunting ground. You can look for him there, but he doesn't have a good temper. When you look for him, you'd better mention my name. Maybe he'll be more polite to you. Many thanks, Brother Su. Nie Tian deeply nodded, sincerely thanking him. Su Qing nodded. Then, he said, the map scroll I gave you can help you find White Demon. However, White Man's divine soul, aura, seems to have undergone some subtle changes. When you approach him, there might be some unexpected changes to the map scroll's response. Nie Tian nodded, extremely grateful. Although Su Qing was young, he was much more reliable than his senior apprentice brother, Guan Shao. After bidding farewell to Su Qing, Nie Tian quickly returned to the hall to meet up with Zhu Shi and Su Yu. The three immediately left the Myriad Yuan Pavilion and returned to Bloodwing Academy. On the way, Nie Tian told Zhu Shi and Su Yu about White Demon. The latter two were dumbstruck. White Demon hiding in Bloodwing Academy was indeed too unexpected. Soon, the three returned to Bloodwing Academy. Without any delay, they immediately headed for the life and death hunting ground. Su Yu explained that the life and death hunting ground was the cruelest place in the entire Bloodwing Academy. It was a true killing ground. Within the academy, if there were any grudges that could not be resolved, they could go to the life and death hunting ground and have a life and death duel. Compared to the life and death hunting ground, the duel between Huangling and Lai Yin was not even worth mentioning. The life and death hunting ground had no rules. It had nothing to do with right or wrong. There was only the strong and the weak, and life and death. Anyone who entered the life and death hunting ground had to be prepared to be killed at any time. The life and death hunting ground was built in a gloomy forest. The entire hunting ground was enveloped by a massive restriction. Anyone who entered had to be prepared for a life and death battle. Normally, other than the disciples who had grudges with each other, there were also some desperate outlaws who used the life and death hunting ground to train themselves in order to achieve a stronger metamorphosis. Nie Tian did not expect Li Yu to be the teacher in charge of the life and death hunting ground. Li Yu should be a bit older than Zhu Shi, so the two could be considered cousins. Not long after, Nie Tian's group of three arrived outside the life and death hunting ground. Even before entering the hunting ground, they could already feel the thick stench of blood. Because the life and death hunting ground was filled with death and slaughter all year round, the stench of blood was very heavy. From the outside, it looked a little scarlet, as if it was shrouded in a bloody mist. Nie Tian stood in place, a strange expression on his face. Nie Tian, what's wrong? Zhu Shi sensed Nie Tian's abnormality and couldn't help but ask. He was worried that Ming Yufeng's sneak attack on Nie Tian still had some hidden injuries, and now they were acting up. White Demon. Nie Tian frowned and spat out a name. Zhu Shi's eyes trembled. He immediately understood something and said in shock, You're saying that White Demon is here? Yes. Nie Tian nodded. He focused his divine sense on the map scroll, trying his best to sense White Man's aura. His divine sense was connected to the map scroll. Just now, he suddenly felt White Man's aura grow stronger, giving him quite a shock. But at this time, the map scroll seemed somewhat unstable. The dot of light representing White Demon began to flicker, slowly becoming weaker and faintly discernible. Su Yu's eyes swept over Nie Tian and Zhu Shi, her expression changing as she said in shock, That White Demon shouldn't be in the life and death hunting ground, right? Nie Tian's eyes trembled, his complexion darkening. Su Yu's guess was very likely. The life and death hunting ground was the cruelest place in Bloodwing Academy. Moreover, it was very easy to hide. However, how did White Demon hide from those who entered the life and death hunting ground? Zhu Shi's eyes trembled as he said in shock, White Demon has the reputation of a bloodthirsty wolf demon. He wouldn't have killed everyone he met, right? Nietion's expression changed once more. After a long moment of silence, he nodded. Chapter 42:30. As Nietion thought of the possibility that White Demon was hiding in the life and death hunting ground, his complexion changed. It had to be said that if White Demon were to hide in the life and death hunting ground, it would truly be an unorthodox move. But once he stabilized himself, he would be extremely safe. Just think about it. Who would have thought that an academy criminal who had committed countless crimes would actually be hiding in the academy? And most importantly, to White Demon, the life and death hunting field was the perfect killing field. White Demon was known as the bloodthirsty wolf monster. His personality was cruel and bloodthirsty, and the life and death hunting ground was a place without any rules. Wasn't this exactly what he needed? Nietion, I think that White Demon really is hiding in the life and death hunting ground. Jushi also thought of this. His eyes trembled as he spoke. Whiteman's strength wasn't too high in the past. Isn't he afraid of being killed in the life and death hunting ground? So you had some doubts, as she hesitantly asked. Nietion frowned but didn't say anything. In truth, he had also thought of this problem. If White Demon had killed everyone he met, then he must have been extremely strong. However, there were strong and weak martial artists that entered the life and death hunting ground. There were even powerhouses of the sky, martial saint ancestor level. No matter how strong White Demon was, it was impossible for him to be stronger than the sky martial saint ancestor. According to the introduction of the mission token, when White Demon had left the academy, he had only been a 9th heavenly tribulation saint king, and only 30 years had passed since then. 30-odd years might sound like a long time, but for a cultivator, it was not a long time. On the contrary, it was very short. One had to know that many martial artists often went into seclusion for hundreds or even thousands of years. Based on this, Whiteman's current strength was only at the low level of a heavenly sense Saint Emperor. It was even possible that he hadn't stepped into the heavenly sense Saint Emperor realm yet. With Tianwu Holy Emperor's strength, it was impossible for him to survive for 30 years in the life and death hunting ground. Senior Sister Sue, what kind of people usually enter the life and death hunting ground? Is there a cultivation limit? Nietion looked at Suyu and asked unwillingly. I don't think so. Suyu furrowed her brows and said with uncertainty, the life and death hunting ground is open to all students in the academy. As long as you want to go, you can enter at any time. I heard that many senior brothers and sisters of the heavenly sense Holy Emperor lose their lives in the life and death hunting ground every year. The heavenly martial saint ancestors expert died in the hunting ground. Nietion could not help but frown when he heard Suyu's words. If what Suyu said was true, then it was impossible for White Demon to survive in the life and death hunting ground for 30 years. Is it possible that White Demon occasionally enters the life and death hunting ground? He has other identities and residences within the academy? Jushi guessed as he looked at Nietion. Maybe, Nietion replied. Before the matter was investigated, he did not dare to jump to conclusions. Hey, who are you people? What are you doing here? Right at this moment, a deep voice suddenly rang out. It was filled with an oppressive aura, causing everyone to feel uncomfortable. The expressions of Nietion and the other two changed at the same time. They turned around and saw a man with disheveled hair and a dirty face standing in front of them. The three of them were dumbfounded. They didn't notice that someone had appeared behind them without them noticing. We are disciples of the academy. Who are you? Suyu was the first to react. She looked at the person in front of her and mustered up her courage to ask. You guys should go back. This is not a place where you should be. The person did not answer Suyu's question. Instead, he sneered and seemed to be very disdainful. This is the life and death hunting ground. Whether we should be here or not is not up to you to decide. Suyu's pretty face stiffened, and she said nervously, there is no smell of blood on you. The life and death hunting ground is not prepared for you. The person sneered again. Then his eyes locked onto Nietion. He paused and said, there is still some killing intent on you. Unfortunately, it is not ruthless enough. You're a teacher of the life and death hunting ground, right? Tian had already calmed down and asked in a low voice. The person sneered and said, "If you enter, then leave." It was obvious that he did not want to talk nonsense with Tian and the others. "Teacher, I'd like to ask you about someone," Tian said, his voice as calm as ever. Bang! However, just as he finished speaking, a violent force appeared and directly pressed down on him. Caught off guard, he was forced back a few meters, leaving a deep gully on the ground. Then he stood firmly. Seeing Tian's frown, the person's expression changed slightly. He then said coldly, "This is the life and death hunting ground. Get lost." Tian frowned. Suddenly, a smile flashed across his face, and he said, "Teacher Liu, I am Su Qing's friend. He asked me to find you." "You're Liu?" Zhu Shi's expression changed when she heard Tian's words. Liu's eyes trembled, and a murderous light flashed in them. He stared at Tian and said in a cold voice, "Who are you? Why are you looking for me?" It was obvious that he did not expect Tian to be able to guess his identity, let alone know that Tian knew Su Qing. "My name is Tian. I'm a new disciple. I have something that I need Teacher Li's help with," Tian said calmly with a faint smile. In fact, the moment he saw Liu, he already had a guess in his heart. The moment Liu made a move, he confirmed his identity. Tian was the Dragon Clan's Dragon Shepherd, while Liu was the Dragon Clan's Demon Tamer. Both of them were part of the Dragon Clan's 3 great Void prophecies. There was a subtle connection between them. This connection was even stronger than Liu and Zhu Shi's bloodline connection. It was this connection that allowed Tian to confirm Liu's identity. "What kind of help?" Liu calmed down a lot, seemingly out of respect for Su Qing. He faintly revealed a heroic face as he spoke in a deep voice. Zhu Shi looked at Tian, thinking that the latter would reveal Liu's true identity. He did not expect Tian to tell him about White Demon, an Academy's bounty mission. "You think that White Demon is hiding in the life and death hunting ground, right?" Liu's eyes flashed with a strange light as he stared at Tian. "Yes." Tian nodded and said, "I hope that Teacher Li can allow us to enter the life and death hunting ground and confirm whether or not White Demon is inside." "Humph." Liu was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly laughed and said, "The life and death hunting ground does not restrict anyone from entering. If you want to enter, you can do so without my permission." Tian frowned. He did not expect Liu to say this. Su Qing had said that Liu had a bad temper.